Welcome back. This is Beyond the Box Score. I'm Dan Schneier. That's Jacob Gibbs. And I'll start the show off by addressing the elephant in the room. There was no Beyond the Box Score Tuesday for the first time this season due to some issues. As you can tell here by addressing the elephant in the room, I've got some breathing issues, so I am using an intake strip to help me breathe. I understand it's distracting, and it certainly looks ridiculous, but I am a ridiculous human being. So if you are distracted by this in the show, please let me know. I will never wear it again, but it is helping me breathe massively, and it's helping me talk and speak today. Jacob himself was also under the weather, much worse than me. I mean, he was way more sick than me yesterday. So we're both dealing with some sicknesses right now, but we were not going to miss 2 shows in a row. So I put on this breathing strip, which I know looks ridiculous. And I feel like I can breathe again and I can talk again. And we can talk football today. And Jacob, my friend, I know you're excited to talk because we've got a lot of rookie receivers to talk about. I watched more tape for this show than probably anyone we've done all year.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for being here, Dan. Good to get the day off yesterday. That was much needed. So I missed the Monday show, and I saw in the comments somebody was like, is this the first time Jacob has slept since week 1? To which I replied, do you think I slept in week 1? And I started thinking about it. I was like, yeah, this is no surprise that my body is like, please stop. Like, I've basically been sleeping for the past 2 days, and I'm feeling a little bit better today, but still running a bit of a fever. So yeah, we're here. I've been watching a lot of film and prep for this. I know that you have too.
I'm excited.
We've got a lot of exciting rookies to talk about. We've seen a bunch of the tight ends already break out, and we're going to get to some of those names. But how about these receivers? You know, there's some intriguing guys, some late round guys who might be breaking out for us soon. Basically, the like thesis for this, you saw this tweet, and this has been making the rounds on the old Twitterverse. This is from Ron Stewart, who does good work. Check out his YouTube channel if you don't know Ron. And Matt Harmon got a hold of it here. It's been all over the place. I think Matt even wrote an article talking about the rookies. And Matt's sentiment here basically is like, if your favorite rookie wide receiver hasn't popped just yet, that doesn't mean that it's over. And so this is the general starting point here. And then, of course, our buddies Ryan Heath, Dwayne McFarland, good friends of the show, super sickos. They've taken it even further and looked like specifically at what types of rookies are maybe the most likely to break out. So we're going to get into that and kind of classify the players that we have in terms of who's maybe the most likely to break out, looking at, historic data as well as what our eyes are telling us, what the data is telling us, what these rookies are doing right now, what their offenses might look like down the stretch. Try to bring all that together and give you guys, we can't promise anything here, but give you the best guesses as to which rookies might be able to help you out in a big way down the stretch.
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited. There are some rookies that are not yet in the roles we want them to be in, and we noticed that just from going through the numbers and watching the tape. But there are other rookies that are really flashing in ways that could lead to breakouts for the rest of the season. Some have already broken out, some will continue that path, and I'm excited to talk about those players. And those are players that we hope you can look into trading for, because there are going to be some players that end up league winners. It's just the nature of this game and the nature of rookies in the second half of the season over the course of the last 5-10 years. So I'm excited to talk about those players, Jacob. But we did want to start, though, before getting into the rookies, talking about some of the high-powered offenses in the NFL and where we're currently at with them as we move forward. So I did want to start with none other than the Kansas City Chiefs, your Kansas City Chiefs. And, man, is it fun to watch this Kansas City Chiefs offense again. I feel like for the first time in so long when I watch this offense, Jacob, it reminds me of the old Patrick Mahomes, the Patrick Mahomes that will drop back in the pocket, buy time in the pocket, and just always seems to have that feel for where space is and where the receivers are open within that space. That's something I haven't seen from this offense in a while, and it gives me a lot of hope for them moving forward. Where do you want to start on the Chiefs offense?
All right, so people are going to guess, probably that I want to start with Rashee Rice. But I actually think the most interesting thing over the last couple of weeks here for the Chiefs offense is Travis Kelce. So I think most would have assumed that Kelce would be dead when Rice came back into the lineup for fantasy purposes. But here we are. I've got, the fantasy points data suite up here to look at some advanced stats, but just the simple stats. Who has more yards over the last 2 games is Kelce. Yards after the catch per reception, Kelsey is absolutely crushing. Has looked fast at times, and I think, maybe National Tight End Day had something to do with it. They were very intent in getting the ball to him this past week. I thought, like, even after the freaking another drop that goes and becomes a Mahomes interception, they immediately come back to him the next drive. So I think that is relevant. I don't want to just copy paste what we've seen, but it's definitely encouraging that I think Kelsey's played better all year. We've kind of noted this, that hey, he looks at least faster than he did last year. There is the weight loss narrative and everything. And then he's somebody that they can target in the red zone. And the Chiefs offense in general is exciting to me right now because they're playing a lot more aggressive. I'm sure that you have enjoyed this because you've lamented over and over, like, how could we waste this Patrick Mahomes era? Like, not that it's a waste, but it's like, come on, Andy, like, this could be so much more fun for fantasy and for real life. If we would freaking be a little bit more aggressive, stop settling on field goals and stuff. They're going for it on fourth down a lot more. And then the run game is pretty much a zero, a neutral at best. And so now Pacheco is hurt too. Like, I don't expect that to improve. I think we're going to continue to see them just like leaning on the passing game here. So the underlying data for Kelsey in terms of first read rate isn't all that exciting. If you can see it on the screen here, it's a 12% rate over the past 2 weeks. This is the time that we've had Rice back. Compare that to 31% for Rice and 20% for Xavier Worthy. I think it's mostly focused on Rice. He's the guy you can trust every week. But I do think both Kelsey and Worthy might be a little bit more live than we would have guessed. Like, Worthy was banged up and Rice came back and it looked like he was completely dominating the touches. And then Kelsey is old, has struggled with drops. Rice comes back and is completely dominating the touches in the exact area that Kelsey normally does. So I think people were kind of down on them both. But as I've watched the offense, I feel like there is a lot of things that could be working for them. And so they're both viable flex plays, especially when the Chiefs get into potential shootouts like they have this week against the Bills.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Even in the non-shootout games where the game script is not perfect, like last week, you still got a lot of fantasy points there, just because the efficiency of the offense. And like I mentioned, Mahomes is seeing the field again like he used to see the field. I would say this, our bet preseason, Jacob, Travis Kelce versus Tucker Kraft may just end up being we both right and we both win, though. That's obviously just a joke because Tucker Kraft's going to take it to a level that even Travis Kelce won't take it to. They'll both have proven to be just excellent value picks. It's really interesting. I saw a debate earlier today. We don't have to get into this right now, but in fantasy, you draft your tight end, and then a lot of the times you look toward those late round guys that you really like. For example, like a Tucker Kraft, or in some cases, some people had Ferguson, who I liked a lot. And you just say, well, I have my tight end already. I've got Bowers or whoever it may be. I'm not even going to consider it. But those players are now becoming viable flex plays. Even if you don't draft them to be your tight end one, they may end up your tight end one. But it's just a different outlook I think we're evolving to. And maybe this is a better discussion for the offseason at some point. I want to put a pin in this. With the receiver play so inconsistent in fantasy football right now, no one ever looks to fill those flexes with tight ends in the past, but it may start to become something we look into. Players like Travis Kelce and Tucker Kraft standing out. So I like that you pointed that out. As far as the Chiefs offense goes, I still have the most trust in Rashee Rice, not only in the role, but just in the red zone role that he's had so far. And then Worthy is a player that I think looked better and more and healthier from the tape I watched of him this past week. It's just the role is starting to look more like beginning of last season Worthy role, which I don't think is something we can trust moving forward. But Mahomes, man, all power to him. He's definitely going to be a top 5 player.
Yeah. I listened to Heath Cummings on Dynasty, FFT Dynasty yesterday with Theo Grimminger, and he's like, he's just QB1, right? Like, isn't that basically where we're at? And I think that's fair. I don't think he's going to keep rushing as much as he has so far, but I think we could he looked at the recent splits, and it's like, this is basically like the Mahomes we've seen in the past, where he's just lighting the league on fire. And I think that is kind of where we're at, and everything sets up really well with this Chiefs offense. And so, yeah, that's what we're focused on here before we get into some of these rookies and potential rookie league winners and everything. We're going to focus on some of these offenses that we needed to talk about because we did miss the past couple of shows.
The
So these
comments are crazy right now about this no strip thing. I'm removing this breathing intake thing. Look, it helps me
why?
breathe. It helps me talk. The comments are getting to me. The comments are getting, I think it's just not enough people know what this is, and it does look ridiculous. So we will continue to not breathe. We will prioritize how they'll show how I look instead. I understand. Look, it's a visual show as well, Jacob. So we will move on from this, but let's get back to fantasy.
Alrighty, you do your thing. I will continue to not care at all what the comments say.
That's how me
Um,
and you differ.
Next team to talk about. We're looking at teams that are just, potential like huge fantasy print shops, point producing factories here down the stretch. And I promise this is not just me and Dan taking victory laps on our two flag plants at the beginning of the year, Rashee Rice and George Pickens. It's kind of that. The Dallas Cowboys are next, and they continue to look like a print shop. So what I have here, the 4 weeks, 4 games that we've had CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens both in there. That's weeks 1 and 2 and 7 and 8. It's been Lamb that's been the dominant receiver. He's averaging 102 yards per game in those 4 games compared to 65 for George Pickens and 33 yards per game for Jake Ferguson. Ferguson has gotten there with touchdowns and receptions. He has 21 receptions in those 4 games compared to 28 for Lamb and 19 for Pickens. I think Ferguson is fine. I think he's like right on the outside of that elite tight end range. He's kind of like the bridge between them and the Travis Kelce's of the world. I think players like Oronde Gadsden, who we're going to get to later, maybe has a little bit more upside than Ferguson as it stands right now, just because he has more yardage potential. Like we've seen with Ferguson, like it's mostly around the line of scrimmage stuff. He's going to kind of have to get there through touchdowns to give you much upside. But the role is still pretty good. 21% first read target rate for Ferguson in these 4 games with both receivers healthy. So that's good. Like that's pretty dang good for a tight end. That's a near top 5 number. And the offense is really good too, as we've detailed, throughout the year. 33% first read target rate for CeeDee Lamb within this sample. So I don't think that, more mouths to feed has necessarily been a bad thing for Lamb. I think that's typically going to be the case when it comes to an elite receiver, is that like the target distribution starts with them and then works its way down. George Pickens has a 23% first read target rate within this sample, which is plenty good for him to be fantasy relevant, especially because the offense is good. Sometimes there's going to be a lot of dropbacks overall because of the defense and all of the other, environmental things here. And because his targets are down the field and he can create yards after the catch, so they can be efficient targets. So he doesn't necessarily need a 30% rate or whatever. But also, I do think that this 23% rate isn't necessarily representative of what we'll get going forward, because the first 2 games, which is half of this 4-game sample, was at the beginning of the year in his very 2 first games in the offense. If we just look at weeks 7 and 8, it's 29% first read target rate for Pickens and 31% for Lamb over these past 2 games, which again, it's 2 game sample size. Don't copy paste this going forward. Lamb had just gotten back into the offense. But it does show that Pickens maybe has the upside to get into that 25 to 30% range, even with Lamb on the field. So feeling really good about all the Dallas Cowboys as we move forward.
Yeah, it's hard for me to put Pickens in that same kind of tier field as Rashee Rice, just given Rashee Rice has done historically and even since he came back. But I still think in that second tier of receivers, he belongs there. And that's where we've had him all year. We had him there preseason as well. And that can be a league winner for you, especially at the price that you paid to get him originally. And then I've seen people ask me about trades from they've made recently for owners that are, I guess, panicking with the return of CeeDee Lamb. I think you did a great job outlining why Lamb's return isn't necessarily a bad thing for Pickens. It's something we discussed throughout the preseason as well. It's going to give him more single coverage looks, more space to work with. And also in the red zone, I've noticed, and this has been the case since CeeDee Lamb got there, a lot of defenses design their defense in the red zone to take away CeeDee Lamb. It's going to open up so many opportunities for Pickens. I think I saw the number earlier this week, like 14 red zone targets or red zone targets for Pickens, which is up near the top of the league. So would continue to trudge forward with Pickens. He would be a hold player for me, not a sell if I have him.
Yeah, he and Rice are an interesting comparison. Like, for dynasty purposes, like I think Rice is clearly the one you feel better about now, but Pickens does feel really good right now and can give you these spike weeks that are huge. But like, yeah, long term, I don't really know what to think of either of them. I've been doing trades with both of them lately in Dynasty. Do you think it's insane to consider selling Rice right now?
In
in
Dynasty?
in any format, like if you're not in Dynasty, if you're not a contender, but even just in redraft, like if you can sell, like the sentiment has rapidly caught up to where you and I had been ranking him, which is like top 5 rest of season, like probably not pushing into like the number 1 overall, but at least top 5 or 6, and everybody acted like that was crazy. And now that's basically where he's at. And so I'm wondering if, we've also talked about the down the stretch, their schedule isn't great. There
Right.
were games where it's like, oh, they got the Raiders or whatever, like maybe the Titans, I think, teams like that where they might be running more or
Right.
whatever, or like resting their players at the end of games. So I'm just wondering if you could like
It's interesting.
turn him into top 5 value if you would do that, or if you're just like rolling with Rice.
It's a very interesting question because you look at that stretch and you're thinking, okay, yeah, the Chiefs have been super aggressive so far. Are they going to be when they're playing these horrible teams that they're up by 3 scores against? I feel like Rice, though, to me, is one of the most matchup-proof players in fantasy. There's like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka. Right, like these are just the players that I think even without volume or without game script can be weekly winners. And he's proven that, Rice, over his career. So I would say no to that on the Rice front. If I have him, I'm just holding him. It really is crazy how cheap you could have gotten him in drafts too.
What if you can turn him into CMC or something like that, or
Okay.
Jameer Gibbs or something? That's what I'm saying. Like, I feel like the sentiment is caught up to exactly what you're describing, what we've outlined. And so it's like, if you can get that value for him, you've already gotten the league winning upside. You know what I mean? Like,
True.
What you waited on has arrived. And if you can capitalize on it, I don't think that's necessarily a bad move if you feel better about somebody else's outlook down the stretch. So yeah, I just wanted to bring
get
it
on
up.
board with it. I could get on board with it for any of the elite players. If you can use them as the base of a deal, I don't think anyone would do like CMC straight up or Bijan straight up for Rice. But if you can do Rice and somebody I actually kind of like that, because I will say the one difference I've noticed about Rice's return versus last season is the Chiefs. Yes, he still has a great role in this offense, and it's obvious they're designed to get him the football. But there are different players who are winning some of those over-the-middle routes. You mentioned Kelsey looks a lot better this year. That's true. Also, Juju still has a role in this offense and was a big third down getter for them. So at least in this last game. So I think that's also a part of it too. Like maybe it's not the ceiling that it was last year for Rice, even though it has been so far, because the red zone role has been so good in this super short sample size. We have 2 games with Rice, and it's like he's getting all these red zone looks, which has kind of boosted him from last year. So I actually kind of like that play. As far as Dynasty goes, though, that's the interesting one. I have Rice in a few Dynasty leagues. I am like very unsold on the idea that the Chiefs are going to re-sign him. Not just because of the off-field stuff, just because of their structure of their roster and their salary cap situation. It's like they've used the void years. They've pushed a lot of the cap down. They re-signed a ton of players on offense and defense. It just doesn't seem likely to me that they're going to re-sign him. Is he up this year, Rashee Rice, or is it next year? I can't remember. Let me look at it real quick, because that will be a big determining factor on where I stand on him in Dynasty. So still on his rookie deal, and it looks like he runs out after 2026. So he's got another full season with the Chiefs. I don't think now's the time to deal him, but this offseason, I'm more open to it, because I just don't believe, looking at the structure of their salary cap and roster, that they're going to re-sign him.
Yeah, just an interesting idea. Like, I mean, I've had people ask me about trades where they're like, I'm sending away Christian McCaffrey for like Rice and Kyron Williams or something like that. Like, would you do that? And I was like, I wouldn't really want to. Like, I would want to keep McCaffrey unless I like feel like I have to, And he's like, well,
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I do have to with my team construction. I really need the like 2 starters, And so
Right.
I want to bring that up. Like, I do think that these players can still get traded. It's obviously dependent on the context of your league, but like both sides, like you could still get Rice. You could potentially get somebody like Christian McCaffrey or Jonathan Taylor or something with Rice.
Right.
Just think it's interesting. I don't like things shift so quickly with the values. You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
And at this point, like everybody and their mom's talking about freaking Rashee Rice. And like, you see all the charts since he's been back. He's the best receiver in fantasy, like you see like, over his last 11 games, he's literally foolproof, like never fails. And there's upside for 30 points because of the red zone. Like the Chiefs are on national TV every week. Like I think you could potentially get something massive for him if you've waited and you're inclined to do that. Just look at the rest of the season schedule and see if you feel like there's the upside for him to have these kinds of huge games over and over and over. And if not, then maybe you could get more upside somewhere else. But we should hit our break and get back with a few more offenses.
We're going to hit our break. And before we do that, I do want to say one note on this offense. I want to throw it out there into the ether for now, Jacob, in case it comes true. I am very, very irrationally high on Kareem Hunt for this next stretch of games with Pacheco out. I think we're going to see shocking fantasy numbers from Kareem Hunt for a little while now. And people are going to, I really do think he's going to get touchdowns, think he's going to get more usage, and it's going to be shocking what he's going to be able to do. And that's just a testament to, one, what the Chiefs are able to do offensively in the position they put their running backs in, and his role in this offense, which is every red zone series, pretty much every red zone snap. And now it's going to be more of the between the 20 stuff with Pacheco injured for a sideline. But we're going to get to a break. I do want one more thing before we get to a break. As Morgan said in the comments, I am channeling my inner Cam Scadaboo today. I can barely breathe. This thing helps me breathe. I'm that sick. I don't know what's going on. I think I have massive issues, deviated septum, among other things. But we are still here delivering the take. So please hit the like button. Please do us a favor. Support this show by hitting the like button. That's how you can support our show. I haven't asked in a while, but I really need you to hit that like button right now. Leaving comments both before and specifically after the show, that helps a lot as well. But please do us a favor and leave the like right now. We're going to go to a quick break. We're going to get into one more offense we want to talk about, and then a bunch of different rookies we watch tape on.
What's he like? The happy-faced killer?
You mean my dad? Be glad you never have to know.
You think that you're so much better than me.
You're just like your old man.
I'm not like you at all.
All right, let's talk Chargers offense. It's nothing more fun for us to do right now than watch Oronde Gadsden on tape. We said last week, blow your entire waiver budget on Gadsden. I hope you listen to us because I don't know if we're going to see another waiver play like that rest of season.
For sure. Yeah, we've been talking about Gadsden for a while. I mean, like, if you guys have been listening to the show, you've known about this guy, and he's now in a full-time role, 82% route rate over the past 2 weeks. What I have here is week 7 and 8 for the Chargers when they've had Quentin Johnston back in the fold. You see 91% route rate for McConkey, 83% for QJ, 82% for Gadsden, and 64% for Keenan Allen, 34% for Trey Harris. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. This is the key number for Gadsden, 149 air yards, 11.5 yard average depth of target. Leads the team in receiving over these past 2 games. And I think just like being able to get access to that type of downfield looks with, a 21% first read target rate, that's just a recipe for massive upside as we've seen. And then there's also the red zone role. The rest of the team, if you can't see the screen here, 36% first read target rate for Ladd McConkey. Feels like we're back on track with Ladd. He's just continuing to get better as the year's gone on. 32% for Keenan Allen. So I know it's been a little bit concerning lately. I feel like his role has fluctuated a little bit. But when he's on the field, he's been a really important player. He has 11 first downs over these past 2 games, which is the most of any of these pass catchers. And then QJ's been the guy who's missed out lately, at least 7% first read target rate. But we've brought up that, the offensive line is part of that. They're trying to get the ball out a lot quicker. And then also, if they're playing with a big lead, they don't necessarily probably need to be taking as many deep shots. I think QJ will probably have better games. Already we're seeing defenses adjust and try to take away Gadsden, which is so crazy. But I mean, the people are taking notice. He has 241 yards over the past 2 games. He's getting touchdowns. Of course, the defenses are taking notice. He's a real weapon. And the coaching, it's not like something random. The coaching staff has been talking about him nonstop. So I do think defenses are taking notice. So where's your head at with the Chargers, Dan?
Yeah, it's really fun to watch this offense because Justin Herbert runs this offense and he's the most talented quarterback. Just athletic or naturally gifted quarterback, I should say, in the NFL. And what I've noticed with this offense is they're taking advantage of matchups, and Gadsden is going to mostly be their best matchup on any given snap because you can put him. And the thing I loved about last game is because it was the first full game I got to watch of them, not just on the tape in the broadcast. And they use him in line. They use him in motion off the line of scrimmage. They use him in line, and then they have him running as the sniffer blocker, and then they'll kind of throw back some screens to Gadsden. And then they just have these matchups they can find for him as the big slot or the boundary receiver. We've talked about this last episode, but it's worth mentioning again. that are winning matchups every single time. Like in the red zone, that touchdown Gadsden scored. That's just like a great job by the Chargers to get him into a one-on-one matchup in man coverage that he's going to win 9 or 10 out of 10 times. Like the people who, I think I saw a stat on this earlier as I was doing a little bit of research for the show, and he was only matched up against a cornerback twice last week. Like the Chargers are doing a great job of getting him matched up against linebackers and safeties.
They have
and
no shot, no chance at all.
From what I've seen in man coverage, that's not going to work. Like he's going to win those routes every single time, if not 9 out of 10 times or 8 out of 10 times. So if you're the Chargers and you're Justin Herbert and you know that you have these wins, you're going to go to them. Now teams will probably play more zone, I would imagine, if he's on the field and find different ways to play him. But like you said, they're trying to take him away and they're not doing a good job of it. I mean, last week he scored what? Like, I think it was like 19 fantasy points or something in that range. He would have gone even more. Most of the production he had was on like the first 2 drives of the game.
I think it was all in the first half.
Yeah, it was all first half. He didn't have a single touch. And in the second half, the Chargers were up by so many scores, and that's a Jim Harbaugh team. They're not going to throw the ball and they're not going to press when they're up by that much. So, if the game script improves as well, it could just be all wheels up for Gadsden. I think I said it last week. I think he has a shot to move into the top 5 fantasy tight ends rest of season. And I don't think that's much of a stretch.
Yeah. What's impressed me the most as I've dug into his film is like he has a really good feel for zone. He's like clearly a matchup problem and a man coverage problem because of the just like vastness of his skill set. Like the different number of ways that he can beat you. He can get open or he can just beat you at the catch point. But like as I've been watching him against zone, he has this uncanny ability. There's been like 1 or 2 reps every game where it feels like the zone coverage is like revolving around him. Like because he's somehow like moving with the zone and staying in the center of it, like finding the soft spot and just moving and occupying that soft spot. That's for a freaking rookie, dude. Like he's like, if he can do that, then the sky is the limit. Like that to me is like better than Darren Waller really was ever doing at the peak of his powers in terms of like finding like a consistency to his game and an ability to like consistently present an open target. I don't know if we can quite say that he's at like peak Darren Waller in terms of like beating man coverage, but like he could get there. And so, yeah, I just, it's hard to be more excited and bullish than I am right now on Gadsden. I just traded him away in Dynasty this past week. It was a pretty crazy move. I don't know if you saw, but it was a massive.
I saw that mega trade. You put it on Twitter. That was
it got
wild
me.
Trade.
It got me Patrick Mahomes. But I had to give up Gadsden. He had to be in it, or the other guy wasn't going to do it. And I really didn't want to. But I got Colston Loveland and I got Terrence Ferguson back to like give me some more tight end upside. But man, dude, like you guys know how excited I was about Colston Loveland and Terrence Ferguson. And like obviously Patrick Mahomes, like we said, he could be QB1, and still I was terrified making that trade because Gadsden looks like he could be legitimately just a monster breakout. Like doesn't matter where he's drafted. Everything is set up perfectly. Like he's with Herbert, he's with Harbaugh, who is Vernon Davis, he was with Roman, who is Mark Andrews. Like it's just a perfect dreamboat setup here. And I think the film couldn't be better.
The film could not be better. The matchups, like he wins these matchups, and he's got Justin Herbert. What I was most excited about just watching the full game, one final thing to add is like there were so many snaps where the Chargers were in 11 personnel and he was the tight end and 11 personnel. They're not taking him off the field a lot. They're not taking him off the field to put on these like blocking tight ends or these guys who are better in line, because I think they realize and they recognize they may lose a little bit in the run game that way. But it's worth it from a matchup standpoint and from a schematic standpoint to have him on the field at all times, because he is somebody that the defenses are adjusting to and the defenses have to account for on every single play. I couldn't be more excited about him. Again, we said blow your budget on him. I thought maybe we were not exaggerating, but like getting a little too high on it. Now the sample size is growing and he continues to dominate. So I really think he has a good chance to be a league winner.
That was my main rationale, but behind like being willing to send him was like, I already have a lot of Gadsden, and I think Loveland can be somebody who's on the field all the time, and I don't know that Gadsden will ever be that. He has been so far, and like last week it was really encouraging that he was on the field so much still because they were winning and just cruising, but like I think they passed on all but one of the 11 personnel plays that he was on the field for, which is crazy. It was like 22 of 23 plays. And so I don't think that's sustainable. That's like a clear tell that if they trot out, 3 receivers and 1 tight end being Gadsden, that it's almost guaranteed to be a pass. I think defenses would adjust that. Like defensive coordinators is going to make note of that from last week.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Because I mean he's been what you'd expect as a run blocker. He's a rookie. He's 236 pounds. I think he's put on weight over the past year or two.
He was up to 250 on the prime broadcast.
He looks strong. So maybe he can fill out and be this player. But it's possible that as the year goes on, they have playoff aspirations, that maybe the role scales back to like 65%, 70% route rate or something like that. If they feel like if they feel like they can't keep getting away with what they've been doing, and they need a more neutral approach when Hampton gets back. Just something to keep an eye on.
I think for some of these like players, the value to watching the tape like we do it is that you can see the ones who just have that it factor. I think he's a clear example of somebody who has that it factor. And what I mean by that, it's like the route savvy. It's understanding space post snap. It's understanding where to be within zone coverage for your quarterback and where the little nuances in your route running against man coverage and how he adjusts the football when it's thrown to him. He is a hands catcher. Like he doesn't have the issues that someone like Quentin Johnson on this team has had in the past. And like we've seen from other tight ends who kind of let the football come to them and catch it with their body. He's a hands catcher. He looks like a receiver playing tight end out there. And it's another win for the bloodline team, right? Like you get the Rondé Gadsden's son. Like some of these bloodline players, look, they've played football their whole life. They've had the best coaching and they have the genetics to do it. I get it. He was a 5th round draft pick, but I don't care about that anymore. Like it means nothing at this point. It's what you see on tape and what he's able to do against NFL defenses. So there will always be doubters for him. And given that offense and how many players there are to pass the football to, it's not going to be perfect every week. I don't think, Jacob, there are going to be situations where it's just like 4 for 65 and he makes the most of his 4 targets. But there are also going to be games where they need to get into these shootouts. And when those games happen, man, he is a possibility to light up a week anytime.
Absolutely.
All right, let's transition.
Let's transition.
Let's transition. Do we need a break first? Let's do one more break first. And I've decided I'm going to wear this breathing nose strip for that show because I can breathe with it. And I am all jammed up besides that. And I will take all the hate in the comments. I know I look ridiculous, but I don't really care about looking ridiculous. This is a show about football takes, not about how ridiculous Dan looks. So let's take a break and we're going to get back to some more football takes.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
that is a rookie mistake,
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Yeah.
Alrighty, I'm going to throw some tight end data up on the screen for you guys, and we're going to talk through the rest of these tight ends, some rookie tight end data. All right, this is True Media here. Let me zoom in, make this a little bit better for you visually. So no tight end has more routes run than Mason Taylor, round 2 rookie for the Jets. Another guy with NFL lineage, of course. It's Jason Taylor's kid, if you don't know. Pretty solid stuff overall for Mason Taylor. Part of it is probably due to the fact that the Jets don't really have anybody to throw to. But still, I think for him to, have freaking 12 targets in a game is meaningful. And I just want to bring him up because he's not somebody I've been enamored with in the same way that I am with a lot of these other tight ends that are extremely exciting, like Harold Fannin, Gadsden, Colston, Loveland, and Tyler Warren, of course, at the top end. Even guys like Elijah Arroyo, ridiculous athlete, Terrence Ferguson, like even Gunnar Helm, I really, really like and talk about him all the time. I don't talk about Mason Taylor that much, but 19% target share on the year for Mason Taylor. And recently we've seen it really scale up for him. So I think he is just somebody to keep an eye on. I think even when Garrett Wilson comes back, that he's still going to be involved. So he has a 33% first read target rate is his highest on the year. I'm going to give you guys, we're going to run through some of these profiles and talk about like some of their spike weeks and stuff like that. He hit 33%, which is really, really high for a tight end, 28% this past week and 24% in week 5. So 2 of those 3 rates came with Garrett Wilson on the field. And I do think that's relevant. Do you have any thoughts on Mason Taylor? Probably not a high upside guy, not necessarily like the league winning type of tight end, but I do think we'll probably see him continue to produce, maybe produce more down the stretch.
Yeah, the Jets certainly want to get him involved in this offense. There's a path toward him being the number 2 target rest of season for that offense once Garrett Wilson comes back. Great player, great prospect, I thought, with another bloodline player, obviously, Jason Taylor's son. I think he's done a good job of like solidifying his role within the offense, and that's via, knowing where to be as a rookie tight end, blocking, all those things. As far as like what he offers in the passing game, it does feel to me still to be limited by Justin Fields. I understand Justin Fields looked great last week, and he moved through his progressions, and he got the ball out to different players within that offense, but that was against the Bengals defense. And I think we're learning this Bengals defense may be trending toward worst in the NFL rest of season. So I need to see it more, and I need to see the consistency. He's like, the concern you would have for Gadsden is like, oh, well, look at all these targets in the Chargers offense. We're going to get inconsistency week to week. I don't have that kind of concern for him. I have that kind of concern for a player like Taylor because I don't trust the offense. It's similar to, some of my takes in the past on players like Judkins and players that on offenses that I think have a good chance to be dead a lot of weeks, 100, 200 yards of offense, total offense, and 1 touchdown maybe.
Alrighty. I've got another cool metric for you here, and this will get us to Colston Loveland. So this is the highest percentage of team receiving first downs when on the field. 2 of my favorites here, Gunnar Helm and Harold Fannin, up here above 30%. So Tedero McMillan has the highest rate at 37%. Gunnar Helm has a 32% share of the total first downs produced through the air when on the field. Harold Fannin is next at 31%. Here's Jalen Knoll. We're definitely going to spend some time with him at 30%. And then you get to Emeka Egbuka, 28%. Gadsden, 27%, tied with Tyler Warren at 27%. Also at 27% is Mason Taylor. So really, there's some underlying stuff that suggests that he's potentially a pretty good player. I think he has a really high floor. He's super young, and to be doing this already is pretty encouraging, and he's probably going to be somebody who stays around as a starting tight end for a while, if I had to guess. Good blocker, too. He's definitely somebody who can be on the field all the time. Mitchell Evans is another tight end. Shout out Mitchell Evans for the Panthers that absolutely blocks his freaking butt off. I love this guy. And he makes some really good catches, too. A really talented player that got hurt his last year and kind of flew under the radar. But the Panthers are, kind of like the Titans. They've got a move tight end, and then they drafted this guy who they think can play more. I think he's clearly a better blocker than Gunnar Helm for the Titans. But it's like Jatavian Sanders is kind of that move tight end who, if I had to guess, will settle into more of a 50% type of playing time role, whereas Evans could potentially play on all 3 downs. So he's definitely a name to know for dynasty leagues. The next tight end we find all the way down here at 18%. And that's Colston Loveland, tied with Elijah Arroyo. This isn't a bad rate, and it's a small sample size. So I don't want to overreact and say, Loveland's playing worse than the tight ends that we just talked about. But I did watch every Colston Loveland route from the past 2 weeks, and I didn't see much that encouraged me to think that things are going to turn around quickly. Part of that's Caleb. We've talked about that a lot. But also Loveland there's a clear difference when I'm watching Gadsden and I'm watching Loveland. And I was hoping that he might look sort of similar when working down the field. But I feel like the feel for space and zone clearly is better for Gadsden. Part of it is that it's so nice, working in that Chargers offense with Herbert and everything, and all the weapons there. Whereas the Bears are still kind of figuring this thing out. Ben Johnson says that basically every single week, that we're not quite where we want to be. But also, yeah, Loveland doesn't seem like he looks a lot more like a rookie. He doesn't seem like he has as good of a feel for things right now. And then he also I don't think he's moved as well as I would have expected based off of all the college film that I watched. I wonder if he's maybe not quite healthy. He started the year off the preseason banged up, and then he got, injured his hip as well. So I did want to just report to the Loveland people, as we've said from the start, like right away, we gave historical context on like this type of a start for a rookie tight end indicates that it's unlikely that he's going to break out at the end of the year. That continues to be where we're at. It's unlikely that Colston Loveland breaks out at the end of the year. If you're holding on to that hope, it's time to adjust. Like I feel like we've done our best to be like, get Fannin, get freaking Gadsden, like get some of these other tight end options for cheap as we've gone along. So hopefully, like you aren't in a boat where you're like relying on Loveland to be the breakout, because I think while it's more likely than somebody like Elijah Arroyo, it's not necessarily that likely. There's a number of things that need to work for that to work. Like and honestly, like even if everything works out well and he's playing well and getting open all the time, I don't necessarily trust Caleb to be able to get to his second and third reads and deliver an accurate ball.
I think you nailed it right there in that last line. There's more to say, but if he's not the design first read in this offense, and he hasn't been what we had hoped he would be, like the objective for us with Loveland, why we were so hyped on him, is can he play the role of Amon-Ra St. Brown or something similar in this Ben Johnson offense? And everything we saw on tape at college and all the data said he could, and he would. Not necessarily that he would, but just that he's capable of it and playing it at a high level. Well, he's not in that role, A. There's still been some routes, though, over the last 2 weeks. Like there was a deep over that Caleb just totally missed him on, like didn't see him open on. Like there's still hope for me on the film, though I do think he is playing hurt to that hip injury and not at 100%. There's still hope.
And pass protection was the problem on that play. I feel like Caleb could have seen him, but it's like that's something too. Is like
pass protection was the problem. It was also Caleb, man. Like he just had no awareness. He just, in my mind, Caleb just doesn't have a good feel for space and where space is post snap right now, at least. Because I thought that play, yes, the pass protection broke down, but I thought Caleb like is small in the pocket and the tackles condensed on him. And it's like, then he's kind of just like in that pocket stepping up. And as he's stepping up in that pocket and taking those little shuffle steps forward, he's not a tall quarterback. So he doesn't really have a good feel for where the space is. He doesn't see it as well as that space condenses within the pocket. And that's something that's just part of his game. He's 6'1" at quarterback. So as far as Loveland goes, if he doesn't have the role of the first reads in the offense, and we don't really feel like this offense is going to get to that point, and maybe he's playing hurt, it's just so many factors working against him, unfortunately. I thought this would be the week, man, with Cole Kmet out, but it just doesn't seem likely.
Alrighty, let's transition to a positive here. We've gotten the comments from our guy Austin Lim. Shout out Austin, made the fan made intro for our show here on YouTube. Tucker Kraft is what Loveland should have been. There's a hit for us. Yeah, Kraft has been freaking awesome. If you follow me on Twitter, you know, like you've seen me illustrating it every way that I can. He's obviously amazing, like historically good with the ball in his hands in terms of creating yards after the catch. But he also has the quarterback who is able to find him in the ways that, you know, Caleb maybe has been deficient. That has not been the case at all with Love. And we're seeing them start to emphasize getting Kraft the ball more. So this is the last offense that I wanted to talk about in the, high-powered potential league-winning type of offense. But maybe it's getting a bit too crowded, you know, like the Chiefs with Rice coming back, with Lamb coming back for the Cowboys. Green Bay has, Christian Watson coming back and potentially Jaden Reed coming back. So where do we sit as we look forward? Here's the Week 8 data, 60% route rate for Christian Watson compared to 70% for Matthew Golden, 87% for Romeo Dobbs. Kraft, of course, had the big game, 126 yards after the catch, was the third most of any tight end in a game over the past, I think it was 20 years or something. It was like just Kelsey and Kittle and then him. 35% first read.
Kelsey, Kittle, him, and Gronk, like the three Hall of Famers and Tucker Kraft.
35% first read rate for Kraft. And this is what's so important to me is that, like, even with these guys back, we are focusing the offense on Kraft as we should. And we're getting downfield targets for Kraft. Freaking 5 missed tackles forced in this game. He's just a lunatic. 22% first read target rate for Dobbs in this game. 17% for Christian Watson. Where the heck is Matthew Golden? Here he is below Malik Heath. 13% for Heath. 9% for Golden. So let's talk. I know you watched some film on Golden and Green Bay. Let's talk about them before we get into the rest of the rookies here.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I watched the past 2 games, which is Steelers and Cardinals. Different outlook for both games because Steelers had Christian Watson back. But the thing that you notice, like part of like Tucker, I love Tucker Kraft, right? Like it's obvious how good he is. We just talked about the context. He separates from defenders in a crazy way post catch, and he's utilized in this offense in a really great way, both in the red zone, on screens. Like his role is solidified. It's the only role I trust within this entire offense. But part of what happened last week, I thought at least, was just an absolute masterclass by LaFleur versus, I believe, I'm blanking on the Steelers defensive coordinator's name. I know it's mostly Tomlin's defense. When it comes to just creating separation, it was hilarious at times. I thought the separation some of these plays created for the Packers receivers against the Steelers defense. It was almost as if LaFleur knew what the Steelers were calling. And the Steelers are a very aggressive defense, right? They run blitz a lot. They do things to try to take away the run game. And that's something that LaFleur will just be able to take advantage of. But if you look at the 2-game sample size, going back to the Cardinals game as well, when it comes to Golden, who's the player who I charted, I just like there were more primary reads for Golden in the game Watson was out. Still, a lot of what he runs is mesh and inbreakers. He doesn't get an opportunity a lot to be that boundary receiver and run a vertical route. They use Romeo Doubs for that a lot. And there are times where like I saw Golden open in the Steelers game. He was open on an inbreaker, but it makes sense the read that Jordan Love went with, because Jordan Love's reading the safety coming down to take away Tucker Kraft, which means he has a one-on-one on the outside for Romeo Doubs, and he throws that up there. And it's like, I don't blame Jordan Love for that. I think he's doing exactly what he's supposed to do. He's playing the quarterback position well. He's reading the safety post-snap, and he understands he has a one-on-one, so he takes the vertical shot. I just wish it was Golden on the outside running these vertical routes than Doubs, but it doesn't seem to be that case. There were some times where Golden would line up as the boundary, but not often. He didn't run a lot of vertical routes out of it. I think I charted one in the 2 games, Steelers and Cardinals last 2 weeks. And a lot of what they do with Golden is they use him in pre-snap motion, but he's not the primary target after pre-snap motion. Like I charted the Texans game, and the Texans were using a ton of pre-snap motion, and then that pre-snap motion receiver, it was Knoll or sometimes Higgins, would be the primary target, but it's not the case for Golden. So it's an interesting offense. I think if I had to pick how I trust it the most, it would go Kraft number 1 by far, and then Romeo Doubs too, just from how they're using this offense. But then there's like the problem of, yeah, this could be an elite offense if they're allowed to be, right? Like, does the schedule allow them to be an elite offense? Does their defense allow them to be an elite offense? And does Matt LaFleur allow them to be an elite offense by pressing the tempo and, getting a lot of plays in? I'm skeptical on all 3 of those things. I think the Packers defense will dominate a lot of these coming matchups. I think the Packers might be up multiple scores in a lot of these coming matchups, and that's not really good for the passing game health in fantasy football.
Yep, I'm right there with you. We were, I think it was clear at the beginning of the year that he was a very risky pick. There's a lot of reasons why, obviously a rookie, but also the Packers like to rotate in a lot of different guys. So the upside, proposition for him was based on the fact that maybe he could become this number 1 receiver for them. Maybe he can be somebody who can win all over the field. But it has continued to be Doubs as the X receiver, and he's playing well. Like, he's not perfect, but he's continued to elevate his game. And he's a pretty solid player, and Matt LaFleur loves him. So I think we're going to get into some of the profiles for like round 1 receivers versus round 2 and stuff like that, what we can expect going forward. I don't think we have any reason to expect that things are going to improve for Golden, is basically where I'm at. So I
think that's fair. And you've even seen some things where, like last week, he's caught pressing, right? That target he had over the middle of the field where he like caught the pass and then like sidestepped 4 yards back to try to create something post catch. It's like, well, I get it, man. He hasn't had much involvement in the offense all game. He finally gets a target and he wants to do something with it. But that's not I don't think that's necessarily a good sign for us moving forward from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah, I think you can see it in his body language. It's tough. So you're probably like, the only way he's getting there is like an injury or something like that.
It would have to be an injury that changes his role within the offense, I think.
Yeah. Alrighty. I want to move on here to some of the stuff, the research I talked about from Ryan Heath and Dwayne McFarland, unless you had anything else on these offenses that we just hit on.
No, let's get to it.
Okay. So here's this from Ryan. This is a thread that Ryan did on Twitter, Ryan J_Heath. We've seen pretty huge increases for rookie receivers. This is past 15 years of data from Ryan, and we've seen, from weeks 1 through 8, which is what we're through, to weeks 9 through 17, a 43% increase in targets, and pretty much across the board, you're looking at 40% increases. So Ryan, contextualized this a little bit here and then gave a look at which receivers have averaged 12 or more fantasy points per game in the second half of the year. And his noticeable takeaway here was that like the guys with the largest boosts were day 2 and 3 picks, who weren't immediately in a full-time role, which makes sense that they would see the largest boost relative to the first half. And then most day 1 guys are playing immediately. And so they have a decent baseline, but they're not necessarily increasing in any sort of significant way. Brian Thomas Jr. was one who did, but then you see, Malik Neighbors, Jamar Chase, didn't. And so maybe not players that we should expect to like break out any more than they already have. If they're already getting on the field, just because they're a rookie doesn't necessarily mean that we should expect better play down the stretch. Xavier Worthy is another one here. Devontae Smith, where it's like Zay Flowers. They did better in the second half, but only by, a small amount, 1 or 2 additional fantasy points per game compared to the first half. And then Dwayne McFarland had something similar here. And so he says, we get a lot of rookie bumps as the season goes on. And there's a lot of factors that drive this, like, bad teams wanting to give young players a look. But he noted that, round 1 guys actually do have a negative performance impact as a whole. And so to me and to, some of the people on Twitter here, the name who stands out, Dan, is Travis Hunter, right? Like he maybe doesn't quite fit the mold of round 1 receiver. He hasn't had, the 90% route rates that we've seen for Tedero McMillan. And so I think this is all interesting. I've got another table here from Dwayne, but before I get to like throw all of that data at you, does anything stand out here looking at what Ryan and Dwayne have said?
And let's move through it, and we'll get to some of like the takes, the player takes as we go through.
Okay, then I'll get right into this here. So this is per Dwayne. If you can see it on YouTube, the receivers are in blue here. He has every position, and on the left you'll find fantasy points per game and the rest of season increase from weeks 1 to 8 and then on, and then also snaps, so just playing time. And as I dug into this, what stood out to me was round 2 players really, both at receiver and tight end, really look good. And that was just interesting to me because like round 1 players didn't see a huge increase from the first to the second half. And so basically across the board, you see a boost for these rookies like everywhere, which is why like the numbers we started with Ryan showed that, rookies get better as the year goes on. But it's more so the later round guys than the round 1 players. So I feel like we're going to go round by round. I feel like round 2 is the big takeaway, but also some of these later players, you can see like 50-40% increases. And so if you feel good about a late round guy you can pinpoint, that's definitely relevant. Do you want to just start with round 2?
Yeah, let's start round 2 and move from there.
Okay. So round 2, the first receiver drafted in round 2, I don't know if many people remember this, but it was Jaden Higgins ahead of Luther Burden. Was a bit of a surprise. And so the Houston Texans have had plenty of reason to get Higgins on the field, but it hasn't amounted to much. We got a 16% target per route run rate, 1.22 yards per route run. Only 14% of his routes have come from the slot, which is, I think, a problem. I think, Matt Harmon has outlined that he would like to see him used in the slot more, and he might struggle outside against press coverage and as a vertical separator. And I think that's pretty much been borne out. And so 14% is really low for any player. 11-yard average depth of target is pretty high. And so it's kind of a volatile role here. And that's, I think, why, the 16% target per route run rate is so low. The single game high for Higgins is 86% route rate. So that is at least good that we're seeing him. The Texans are willing to get him out there as a full-time player, which we haven't seen with a lot of these guys. His single game high for first 3 targets is 23%, first 3 target rate in week 8. But the other weeks, so week 7 coming out of the bye, only 12%. Week 5 was only 10%. So there wasn't any like huge increase. It didn't seem like they wanted to increase his role. Really, it was just that Nico Collins got hurt. And so, yeah, on that yard per route run rate, that puts him in the same range as like Jack Besh, Alec Iomanner, below Travis Hunter, Kamire Dike, who we're going to talk about, below Matthew Golden, who we've said has been a bit disappointing. 1.22, not good. You watched the film. What do you think of Jaden Higgins?
Yeah, so I want to start with just what I saw from the Texans offense, which I like. So I like that coming out of the bye week, they were using more bunch formations, 3-by-1 sets with the wide receivers on the 3 side stacked and bunched together in tight splits. It really felt very Sean McVay-ish and almost like they were going back to what worked so well for CJ Stroud before they made Bobby Slowick the scapegoat for what was really just god-awful offensive line play, if you really look at it. And I think it was a big mistake they probably regret, in my mind, moving on from Slowick. So I wonder if they're going to continue to do that moving forward. And that led to some free releases for Higgins specifically. I feel like he did his best work when he was lined up on the boundary, but running some kind of quick release off the line of scrimmage with an in-breaking route. That's where he had 2 of his catches where he just kind of can like use, and he still is very good footwork for a big man. It's not like Drake London level or Teteroa McMillan level, but it is good footwork. The problem for him, though, was he did get a play you mentioned that you just referenced where he did have an isolated route outside in press coverage, and CJ Stroud did a great job post-snap, reading the safety rotation, confirming he had a one-on-one with Higgins on the outside, and he just couldn't beat press at all on that play. And there was another play later where he ran a vertical route with the corner and trail off coverage, and he tried to run like a comeback route off of it. And I didn't feel like he was that good at running. Like, it just doesn't look all that fast or explosive is probably the best way to describe what I saw from Higgins on tape. And look, there are ways he's going to win. Like you mentioned it, they can use him in a different role that can help him win, but it doesn't appear to be their interest to use him in that role. What I mean by that is like the times where he got his targets, he was, as I said earlier, the pre-snap motion man. The Texans did a great job, I thought, in this game of using pre-snap motion with the wide receiver to confirm man or zone pre-snap, and then throw that, like beat the coverage based on the route they were using for that pre-snap motion receiver. So he got some of his targets there and some of his catches there. Like I said, he won with those quick in-breakers as well. And then his touchdown was just a busted coverage. And he was the pre-snap motion receiver there, so it was a good job by them. But it was really just a busted coverage. So that it's hard for me to look into as like a big plus for him as well. I don't have too much hope for him right now within this role, and then kind of based on what I see from him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The fantasy points average separation score is okay on him, and the win rate is okay. Like both have Higgins looking like a slightly above average, above replacement level type of player, which I think as a rookie is good, and points to like maybe some upside for him to be able to beat man coverage as his career progresses. But I don't think this setup is good for him, like you outlined. Like they need to get the ball out quicker, and I don't think he's somebody who's going to be reliable as a quick winner right now. Okay, so that's our first round 2 receiver. The second one looks a lot better on paper, but he is dealing with a concussion right now. That's tough. That's Luther Burden, 25% target per route run rate, 2.8 yards per route run, but there just haven't been that many routes. 39% slot rate for Luther Burden, so they're using him in and out of the slot, which is interesting. There was some question of whether he could be an outside receiver as a pro, but I think he's looked fine when they've used him that way. He has a 7.3 yard average depth of target. In terms of his single game highs, they really haven't done a whole lot to, I thought maybe they would be intentional about getting the ball in his hands, like when he was on the field, especially because his per route data is so good. When he's on the field, they would be designing a bunch of plays for him, and they do occasionally, but in terms of like his single game high first read target rate, it's only 13%. His single game high route rate is only 39%. So a little bit discouraging in terms of being able to get on the field. But if you look at the data that suggests that like round 2 players are our best bet for getting on the field more as the season goes on and producing more, this is the clear win on paper. I did watch Luther's film, and I think basically the game just looks incredibly easy for him. I haven't seen a lot of vertical wins. I was hoping that he would look a little bit more electric as a mover. And I think he's just a kind of weird athlete. Like this stood out to me in college too. Like he wins with his body a lot more than I would have expected. And he's a bigger guy than I think people give him credit for because he was in that slot role at Mizzou. So he has been a route winner, but it's not a lot of like massive wins. He just like does consistently get open. The fantasy points data suite has him basically in the same range as Higgins in terms of being a slightly above average player in terms of route win rate and separation score. I haven't loved his work versus zone, and I don't think that he's quite on the same page with Caleb Williams. It's not as bad as DJ Moore and Caleb Williams. But that's where I landed on Luther, was like watching the film, plus the fact that they haven't really seen that intent to get him on the field, plus the fact that he's currently dealing with concussion, makes it feel a lot riskier than the data would suggest, which is that like, wow, this is exactly the profile you want to bet on. So what do you think about all that?
Yeah, it's tough for us. It's a tough look. These are two highest draft capital wide receivers, rookies, and I don't think either of them are players in Higgins and Burden that we're going to suggest could be league winners to our listeners rest of season. I'm very on board with you. In addition to everything you mentioned, it's the team context as well there that really draws me back or holds me back from finding excitement there. I did like his profile coming out, but it just doesn't feel to me like we're going to get league winning stretch run from him.
All righty. I do think it's relevant to, like, if you just want to make a blind bet, or if you liked his profile coming in, like all the data looks really good. He's, to me, the best bet we have at receiver among these round 2 guys. The other two are Trey Harris for the Chargers, who we've talked about a ton. I don't really have anything to add on Trey Harris. He continues to look good. I liked that he was still getting out on the field this past week. They ran a lot. Like anytime he was on the field, I watch all his routes, and they were like almost all like 12 personnel. So they've got just one or two receivers on the field. And they're almost all play action. So it's like those could be cool. Like they're getting some downfield shots to him. And I thought he looked good again. He looked comfortable out there. But overall, you're probably going to need an injury for Trey Harris to break out. Did you have anything on him, or do you want to talk about Jack Besh?
No, let's move to Besh. I like Harris, but it's a tough spot for him fantasy wise.
Besh might be a sneaky guy who could break out for you down the stretch. He fits, the profile of a round 2 guy who could get more playing time. His playing time has been super limited. Overall, like the data isn't great, but it's such a small sample size that I don't want to overreact to it. He did get up to an 80% route rate, 17% first read target rate. Those are his single game highs. So I think that they're going to transition to more Besh down the stretch. And he's somebody who can be an occasional route winner and a short yardage guy, can create yards after the catch. And it just makes sense to me that like they don't have much else going on. So they would look to get him the ball, like if they're, if it's a lost season. So he kind of, to me, is like Kamire DK, who I like a lot for the Titans, where it's like, I think this team's going to transition to getting more and more young guys the ball. DK to me has looked like the more exciting skill set on film, but I know people really like Jack Besh, including the freaking Raiders who took him in round 2. Is he somebody you'd be taking a shot on? Like if you got an open waiver wires or open bitch spot?
Absolute bully at TCU. This looked awesome on tape at times and could be like a role that teams find for him. The Raiders specifically can find for him that could be a mismatch. Like we talk about with a player like Gadsden, different type of players, but similar in that regard, like get him against linebackers, get him against safeties. But no, I don't have much faith because it's a team context issue for me. I just have a lot of trouble buying into these types of teams. The Raiders, to me, are showing no signs at all of being a functional offense at any point. Maybe when Colton Miller comes back, I can reevaluate that. But they were having issues on the O-line even before Colton Miller went down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's tough, man, because like round 2 has been the best round to bet on, but I don't feel great about the profiles, especially at receiver.
Right.
And I do think like as the year goes on for fantasy, if you're looking for league winners, you kind of like, there's a few offenses that you just throw in the trash, where it's like nothing good is going to come from this offense. Pretty much every week it's an albatross. And the Raiders have to be near the top of that list, which is why I've been so hesitant with Ashton Genty.
Yep.
And his rest of season outlook. I guess it's just, to me, Besh is like the guy who will probably be out there all the time as the year goes on. So we could see Bowers or Jacoby Myers shut down. And he is the guy who has the fantasy friendly skill set where he could pile up catches, and whoever's in there, quarterback, might just kind of lock in on him because the line is a problem. So they're just trying to get it out quick. So it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if he comes on as like a sneaky PPR kind of player. Probably not a lot of upside though.
Yeah, for league winning upside, no, but I could totally see you being right about him being someone worth stashing and scooping. Just, they're in these games where their game script is just them throwing the football for 2 to 3 full quarters, and he's racking up short targets.
Yep. The last two round 2 players here are Mason Taylor and Terrence Ferguson. We talked about Taylor already. He's getting on the field a ton, and they have, funneled targets to him a few times. Overall, the data is decent. 17% target per route run rate, 1.05 yards per route run, 31% of his routes coming in the slot. So he is used more in line than some of these more like fantasy friendly tight ends, but that's not a bad thing. You get a lot more mismatches in there. Great blocker, used around the line of scrimmage more, 5.8 yard average depth of target. Compare that to Ferguson, who I think is going to get used down the field a lot more. Maybe if he eventually finds his way into a full-time role, they are coming out of their bye this week, so keep an eye on that to see if the role changes any. Then maybe get some more short catch and run targets, but so far it's been mostly just like pushing down the field with him. And man, he can burn, like McVay gets him lined up on these linebackers who aren't quite ready and don't know if it's going to be a run or a pass on play action. It's like, okay, like it's over, like you are not catching him. So Terrence Ferguson is a really interesting player to keep an eye on. And I think the most likely of any of these players, in my opinion, to see more playing time and more production down the stretch, because like the offense is such a good infrastructure for him.
I struggle with that just because I think part of the boost for him would be like, okay, well, the Rams have played way more 12 and 13 personnel than ever before. They're a predominantly 11 personnel team in McVay's tenure, and more so than like any team in the NFL. Well, Puka's coming back. Like, it's just, I struggle to see where he's getting enough playing time from, unfortunately.
Yeah, we'll see. It just like he could be Ben Sinnott. I brought that up to you pre-show. Like, It could be that kind of a situation, but they really liked this guy. Potentially, like, we're willing to draft him in round 1. Is kind of the rumblings we heard. So I think that there is a real chance that they have a role in mind for him that they would like to get him ready for, but maybe not. Maybe it doesn't happen this year.
It's possible.
Okay, so this is maybe a weird transition, but I want to shift from round 2 to rounds 5 through 7, and this will be a quick discussion, of course, because there's not that many candidates that are relevant. But this has been the highest, probability of increasing playing time and increasing fantasy production from the first half to the second half. So I think that these players are relevant. Of course, Aronde Gadsden at the top. We talk about him all the time. If you can buy him, like I think it's worth exploring that, even if it does, feel expensive. Obviously, you don't want to get freaking crazy with it and trade away like Trey McBride or something like that. But like, I do think he is potentially the type of player who can win you your league, can fit into that high upside league winning kind of archetype. Mitchell Evans for the Panthers, probably not quite so much, but there is some really good underlying data for him. So for tight end premium leagues, deep leagues, keep an eye on him. He's playing more and more as the year goes on. Even with Ja'Tavion Sanders coming back, he's still getting on the field. Keandre Lambert-Smith and Torrey Horton are two guys who I liked a lot. KLS hasn't gotten in the lineup. Don't think he's relevant unless there's injuries. And then Torrey Horton has gotten on the field, but this team uses 2 receivers most of the time. They're rarely going to 3 receivers. So his highest route rate of the year is 62%. And I think it's just because of that. That's what the role is. His highest first read target rate of the year is 27%. That's really good. But that's his only rate above 15% all year. On the year, he has a 17% target per route run rate and only 1.07 yards per route run. So those aren't going to look good, but at the same time, he's only getting out there when it's 3 receivers, basically. And Jackson Smith-Njigba is like the biggest target black hole of the season, basically.
Yeah.
And so that's relevant, I think. When you look at this per route data, I would not overreact to it. The other thing is his freaking average depth of target is 16.6 yards. So that's extremely high.
Right.
And yeah, it's just hard to get targets when you're occupying that type of a role. I think the big takeaway for Horton is that he's getting on the field.
Yes.
And there have been plenty of plays. There have been touchdowns for sure. Like, if something were to happen to Jackson Smith-Njigba, I absolutely do think that Torrey Horton would give you a shot at getting league-winning upside down the stretch, because the offense is good. So it's like if the offense continues to be good, if Sam Darnold continues to play well in terms of finding people down the field, I think that he could really give you some upside.
Yeah, this is what we're looking for. I watched his snaps from the past game, 18 snaps before their bye week. He looks good out there. The role isn't there, but this is what we're looking for, right? Like, it's not just if it's Jackson Smith and Jigba gets hurt? What if Cooper Kupp, who's been hurt a lot in his career and he's an older veteran player, gets hurt again? That's where I really, because I think he'll play. It's a different, obviously Kupp gives them something different, but I don't think they're going to play anyone over Horton if that happens. I think they're recognizing at this point that he's somebody you got to get on the field. They just don't run a lot of 11 personnel to get him on the field. So I look at it like, just like you said, it's a good offense. It's a quarterback who's playing at an insanely high level, especially in intermediate and vertical game. It's exactly what Horton needs. The only thing not going for him right now is the playing time and is the role. And that's the type of player I want to stash at this point.
If Kupp got hurt, I think that there's a chance that we would see more and more Elijah Arroyo. Does that make sense? That he might profile?
Stylistically, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that wouldn't be the case. I'm hopeful they would just turn the offense over to Horton and understand they could do different things with him on the field.
Yeah. It's possible. I think we've seen Clint Kubiak be very adaptive during his time as a play designer, play caller. Like, we just assumed that we were kind of like copy pasting what we had seen when he had Alvin Kamara and stuff. And it's like, nope, that he based what he did kind of around that offense. And now they're not throwing to the running backs nearly as much. They're not using as much pre-snap motion and stuff like that. He's doing what works well for this group of players. So maybe in that scenario, he would adapt and we would see Horton used in a different role than Kupp is being used. Definitely, like, he's at the top of the list for me of guys to keep an eye on. He's one of the rare wide receiver stashes that I think actually makes sense. Preferably, I want my, like, if I've got a bench spot designated for stashing, it's running back almost always, because a running back can step into a huge role, whereas a receiver rarely will. But man, if Jackson Smith and Jigba got hurt, it would be huge, I think, for Torrey Horton, because he can win in a lot of ways. He's not just the downfield guy. Okay. That is Tez Johnson. We cannot forget Tez Johnson. He's our last guy from this group of around 5 to 7 guys. So the per route data is good. 18% target per route run rate on the year with 1.7 yards per route run, which is really good for a rookie, especially a round 7 rookie. So the offense helps that, playing with Baker Mayfield and the Bucs helps that, but also like a decent amount of these routes, he's been out there with really good receivers on the field too. 48% slot rate. So they haven't had to stick him in the slot despite his frame. 12.2 yard average depth of target. So this is a rare player in terms of, 145 pounds or whatever being used down the field. It's somewhere in that Tank Dell, Tutu Atwell spectrum. And his highest route rate, I wanted to point out, 93% in week 8. That's really, really high for a player that's this small. Like, that's honestly kind of shockingly high. His highest first read target rate, though, is only 19%. So, like, Tank Dell, when we saw him at the peak of his powers, was pushing well above this. And I wonder if they don't quite trust Tez to be a consistent down guy, to design a lot of looks for him. So the past 4 weeks, his first read target rates are 15%, 19%, 17%, 18%. It seems like he's just kind of settled into that, which that's not bad. He can make explosive plays. He can make splash plays. As I've watched a bunch of Tez Johnson, and it's like he can win routes, but there are also times where I do think that his weight limits him.
Yeah, he's been a very exciting player to watch, watching their tape of the last 2 weeks. I wrote in my notes, he just simply looks fast, man. It's not just quickness that you would accept. Like, he chews up ground on vertical routes, and that's like so surprising to some people who would just look at his combination of like stride length given his height and then the 40-yard dash time. But it's just a great example of like 40-yard dash time is not really a great indicator. It's all about game speed, play speed. GPS timing is a much better indicator. How do they play in pads with a helmet on? He runs really fast in pads with a helmet on. I thought he run multiple routes over this sample size that I looked at where Baker just got sacked and couldn't get it to him on time. And I will say this about the point you made. While his first read target shares have been disappointing so far since the injury to Evans and just the new look of this Bucs offense, Baker is one of the only quarterbacks in the NFL who's getting to second reads at a consistent basis. So that's a good sign for him long-term, maybe. I thought he did a great job working back to the football on a scramble drill, which just kind of shows me like he has this really good feel for the game, right? When Baker's breaking pocket and it's now off script, he understands where to be in space, where to work back to the quarterback and give that quarterback an option. And I think that will improve over time. Like, their rapport is going to get better and better since he's playing such a big role. So there was, I know what you're saying. There was an inbreaker where I do feel like, his height definitely mattered. He ran an inbreaker and the ball was missed high, quote unquote. But I feel like it was a at the numbers throw for any receiver, but he's obviously a smaller receiver, and it hit him off the hands and it was incomplete, and he lost a chance at like a chunk play there. So there will be times where that happens, but man, he looks fast on the vertical plane. They do throw some screens to him to get him involved, and he's running, a very full route tree, or at least for what they run in the Bucs offense. It's mostly just a lot of like over routes, corner routes, and some vertical routes. That's kind of their whole entire pass game for both Ibuka and him. So I am pretty excited about him moving forward, to be quite honest. As far as we've gone over a lot of rookies on here, I'm not so sure he's a league winner, but he's in that next maybe tier down of players that we've gone over so far.
I think he's very close. Yeah, we'll get to that at the end of the show. I think he's very close. I think in addition to the height, the weight is a problem sometimes. He gets knocked off of his route sometimes, which, to be fair, there's plenty. That's totally normal for rookies. Alec Ironmanner gets knocked off his route all the time, and he weighs like 40 pounds more.
Yeah.
So like it could. Tank Dell rarely did, like maybe he can develop into that type of a guy who just shreds even at the lower weight. And to the 40 time, you've probably heard this narrative, Dan, that like he beefed up for the combine, so it wasn't like he was 145 pounds soaking wet, and that affected his speed on his testing. So who knows? He does look fast out there. Let's transition to another smallish fast guy who I do think is impressing me in similar ways to Tez, where you brought up building the chemistry and trust with the quarterback, because he's consistently working to find open spots and zones, to find space as the play breaks down, where the quarterback can like keep working and then find him. And that's Kamari DK, who is one of the few rookies like I didn't get eyes on in the draft process. There was a group of like 3 or 4 guys who seemed to get drafted just based on athleticism. I wasn't expecting it. And it was like him and Jordan Watkins and players like that, rounds 3, 4. So this is the first round 4 receiver taken. He was taken ahead of Alec Ironmanner for the Titans. And I think he looks really good, man. I'm hopefully I'll get some time to dig into his collegiate film, because like I've loved what I've seen as a pro, but it's a small sample size, so I don't want to be too reactive. And obviously it's on the Titans. But 20% target per route run rate, really good. And I think that speaks to what I was talking about with him being able to find space and get open. It's not just that he's a downfield guy. This is, I think, it's like probably the highest target per route run rate I've listed so far, other than Luther Burden. I think so. Yeah, 25% for Burden, 20% for DK. 1.28 yards per route run, not great, but pretty dang good for a rookie on the Titans. 76% slot rate. They've been moving him around a little bit more lately. 9.6 yard average depth of target. So they're mostly using him down the field. But lately they've been, using him in pre-snap motion. This is something that happens with Tez a lot too, where he's in motion at the slot to get him free releases and get him looks, out of the slot and stuff like that too. His highest single game route rate is 86%. It was up to 86% week 8, and he had a 24% first read target in week 8. So pretty interesting stuff. Have you watched any of the Titans guys this year?
Yeah, I watched the entire game from last week. So
nice.
So it was very fun watch. It's rare that I get a chance to talk about Wisconsin receivers on a fantasy football podcast. And DK was a player who did start his career in Wisconsin and then transferred out to Florida with Graham Mertz when they left. And it was just an absolute mess of a program that Wisconsin has become. And that's kind of an underlying factor in it, in my mind, at least, like players just transferring out, wanting to get the hell away from it. But he always flashed that kind of playmaking speed and ability to stop and start, which I always look for in receivers. I'm always a bigger fan of these types of receivers than maybe like the Jaden Higgins types. And within this offense, what I like the most is just thinking about some of the Titans I watched earlier this year, Jacob, versus what I watched this week against the Colts. With the change in coaching, I do appear to see more route combinations and more route concepts that fit Cam Ward better as a thrower. So what does Cam Ward offer? I look back at my notes from his film review at Miami. He was a player the Giants considered, so I did a ton of film work on him. I called him a big game hunter in the intermediate area of the field. Those in-breakers, those out-breakers in the 10 to 15 yard air yard range, that's where Cam Ward likes to attack. And the Titans did a great job of running layered route concepts that would clear out space in the middle through the slot and then allow these kind of in-breaking routes, these tight in-breaking routes for DK and at times Ironmanner. And DK ran the routes really well and created that kind of separation for Cam Ward. And Cam Ward, the best ability he has is his velocity, the velocity he puts on his throws and he sees the field well from that standpoint in the in-breaking range and kind of that intermediate middle range of the field. So I think the Titans are coming along in the sense of their pass game is starting to feature some of the concepts and some of the route combinations that work best for Cam Ward. And it's very possible that DK could be that receiver that works great for Cam Ward. So I'm very excited about him moving forward, but there's obviously some tempered expectations when it comes to Titans offense, what it means for fantasy and how consistent we feel they can be moving forward. All right, we're going to take a quick break. As Jacob takes a break right there, I also need to run out for a quick second as well. So we'll take a quick break here, and then we'll get right back into some more rookie receivers that we're excited about moving forward.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
You can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. So even if you can't count on accurate expiration dates,
That is a rookie mistake.
or people appreciating your fashion sense,
Jim, the crowd is not on board here.
you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS, streaming on Paramount Plus.
Glad we wear our good jerseys.
Alrighty, we are back here, and we are wrapping up with the round 4 rookie wide receivers and tight ends. So we talked about Kamari DK for the Tennessee Titans. He was the first pick at receiver in round 4, followed by Dante Thornton. So we talked about Jack Besh already for the Raiders. He was the round 2 pick. They then took Thornton as the speed threat, the vertical threat here on the outside. And they've really tried to make this work for Thornton. Like in the preseason, they went to Thornton a lot. And it didn't really amount to much. I think Geno Smith purposely was trying to test out what he can do. And we've seen that his role has actually shrunk as the year has gone on, which is pretty unusual. So we saw early in the year, he was pushing up to 83% route rate. But lately it hasn't been quite at that number. It's 70%, 60%. I think he'll probably be on the field a lot still as the year goes on and they kind of go back to the youth movement to close things out. But I think, if you look at his average depth of target, it has not been below 11 yards in a game all year. It's typically pushing up into this 15, 20 yard range. So he's not really a fantasy relevant player with that type of a role. On that note, Arian Smith is our next receiver, the next receiver drafted in round 4 by the New York Jets. I think all I need to tell you about Arian Smith is that he has a 6% target per route run rate with a 15-yard average depth of target. So it's the exact same type of player. I think he's a sort of interesting prospect long-term, maybe somebody who can do a little bit with the ball in his hands in addition to the deep stuff, but they haven't used him that way at all. So he's only a dynasty type of player for now. Jalen Lane is another one of these. I mentioned there were 3 or 4 guys that I didn't really get an eye on during the draft process much. That surprised me as round 4, round 3 picks. It was, Lane, Arian Smith, and then Jordan Watkins for the Niners, who's one of our next guys here. Lane has gotten opportunities more than the other ones for Washington. He has a 43% route rate, a decent 18% target per route run rate on the year, 1.17 yards per route run. So keep an eye on him. I don't think he's going to matter unless there continue to be injuries, but Terry McLaurin did appear to re-injure his quad. The average depth of target for Lane this year is 13.3 yards, which I think is mostly because of the injury to McLaurin. I think the best fit for him is probably in the slot. That's kind of what we saw when they played the game without Deebo Samuel. So he's an interesting player. He's very electric with the ball in his hands. He's a really a good mover. And we've seen some underlying data that's pretty encouraging for Lane. Jalen Royals was the next receiver drafted. Kansas City Chiefs haven't got a chance to look at him yet. I thought he looked good this preseason, but he just hasn't been healthy since then. And then Alec Iomanner is the next receiver, and he is the rare round 4 receiver who's a starter from day one. 18% target per route run rate for Iomanner on the year, 1.12 yards per route run. So Kamari DK's at 1.28. It's 1.12 for Iomanner. And more of his routes have come while sharing the field with Calvin Ridley, and they were trying to get the ball to Calvin Ridley. More of his routes have come with Ridley on the field than DK. So I think basically they're about the same in terms of production. And I think that what Iomanner's been asked to do is harder. He only has a 17% slot rate and a 13-yard average depth of target. So they're basically saying, week in, week out, like go out and win against some of the best corners, and that is not easy to do. I think the fact that he's gotten on the field and stayed on the field is noteworthy, even though it is a Titans team that is, not playing for much or whatever, and like probably wants to just get the rookies out there. The same could be said for the Raiders with Dante Thornton, and they're kind of like, I don't know about this. Maybe we should kind of be going away from this. This is not working at all. Iomanner keeps getting looks, and he's made some mistakes. He's made some drops for sure. This past week, apparently he kind of slowed his route, did the AJ Brown or whatever on a ball that sailed over his head, where maybe if he would have kept running, he would have got it. So it has definitely not been perfect. But 90% route rates each of the past 2 games, 37% first read target rate as a single game high this year. It was 33% in week 8. So that all is interesting. Dan, welcome back to the program. Always good to get a break on these long shows. Didn't miss a beat. What do you think on Iomanner? You did get to watch some of his film too, right?
Yeah, I watched the Titans versus the Colts. I did think that I was more impressed with DK, but Iomanner's a player who has I want to say a better role, but probably is a better role for them. But like I said, I really enjoyed how the route concepts they're calling now for Cam Ward. So I think Iomanner will benefit from them as well. The issue being this sample size that we're working with is no Calvin Ridley, and Calvin Ridley will be back at some point, maybe as soon as this week. That will definitely impact the offense and the roles for possibly DK. I'm hoping DK will still continue to work in, though, because he's been the most exciting of those two for me.
It's clearly DK above Iomanner for me for this year. Beyond that, I think Iomanner has such an interesting size speed combination.
He does.
That I would probably prefer him, but it's close. But for this year, it's like DK, even if Ridley were to come back, which I don't really know why they would want to be playing Ridley that much at this point. But if he were to come back, I think his role coincides more with the stuff they've been having Iomanner do.
Yes.
But if they play 3 receivers, it won't matter that much. But they do play.
They're probably going to have to a lot, so that's a good point.
Right. But they do play Gunnar Helm and Chigo Okonkwo a lot, but I've heard that Okonkwo could get traded. So there's a number of ways that this could go, but I think the safest to be on the field is probably DK because they've used him in a number of ways. They've used him in the slot. He's given them some wins against zone coverage, which Iomanner has kind of struggled against.
He fits best at what Cam Ward does best, too, in my opinion.
And I think Ward likes him. It seems I watched their past 2 games every route, and it feels like Ward is looking his way more. So I'm pretty intrigued by DK. Alrighty, Jordan Watkins is the last receiver drafted around 4. Hasn't mattered at all for San Francisco. They're all hurt. Gunnar Helm for the Titans, another round 4 pick, and I think would have been a round 2 or round 3 pick with proper testing. He did his testing through a severely injured ankle. And so shout out to his agent there. That is, I legitimately think that really hurt his draft.
Yeah.
Because he was a really productive player at Texas. And then he fell to a range that was weird. And I think it's because athleticism is so important at tight end. And then what do? You don't have his testing. You have bad testing. So that's weird. But he's looked the part. He's looked really good. 21% target per route run rate. That's great. 1.54 yards per route run. That's great for a rookie tight end. 38% of his snaps coming in the slot. I think blocking needs to be better. So I don't know if he'll ever be a full-time player, but maybe. I mean, if Okonkwo gets traded, that's definitely a signal. 55% route rate is the highest that he's been at all year. So again, I don't know if he'll ever be a full-time player. But we are hitting on round 4 now before rounds 3 and rounds 1 because the data that we have suggests that these players are more likely to get on the field more and more as the year goes on. Okay. Unless you have thoughts on Gunnar Helm, let's wrap up and move to round 3.
No, let's go to round 3.
Round 3, another one where there are notable boosts from the research that Dwayne McFarland and Ryan Heath have done from the first half to the second half, but maybe not quite as notable as some of these other rounds we've already hit on. So Harold Fannin was the third pick of round 3, another player who I think, could have easily been a round 2 or higher pick. To me, him and Gadsden stand out as two clear misses for NFL evaluators where they were just like too conservative, not knowing if the player can be an every down player and that sort of thing. And then
kind of not knowing how they would translate to the NFL.
Yeah. And then these two teams that were willing to take a shot on them have been able to translate that right away. And so that is extremely exciting. And I think if you would have had that assurance that they could be basically full-time players, there's blocking concerns with both Fannin and Gadsden for sure. But I mean, same thing for Helm, who's more of a traditional tight end. Like that's just kind of going to be the case for almost every rookie tight end, I think. The fact they've been able to get out there and be route winners and give their offense, wins in the passing game, give them first downs, I think is really relevant. They would have been earlier picks for sure. But I mean, Fannin, we've talked about Fannin a ton. All the underlying data is great. He leads all tight ends in yards after contact. So like he's creating with the ball in his hands. And then we did see when David Njoku was out that he was a full-time player. Did you have anything on Fannin you wanted to
add? No, look, we've spoke his praise a lot. He's an excellent football player. For me, my concern will always be the Browns offense and specifically how long they're sticking with Dillon Gabriel. Dillon Gabriel is the most unplayable player at the quarterback position in the NFL right now. I don't have the stats in front of me, but someone kind of broke it down earlier on Twitter this week. He's just about as bad as it gets in every regard of the game. And I hate to crap on the player. Like it is what it is. He's a great college player and good kid, I'm sure, but he doesn't have a skill set for the NFL level. And it's just so hard to get excited about anyone in the Browns offense for me with him at quarterback.
Yeah. So I love Fannin long term. I don't think he's probably going to be a league winning type of player for you this year. It's kind of like, to me, my best guess for Fannin, how he could be, is something like Jack Besh, where it's like, okay, it's just like the offense is completely bottomed out or the team is completely bottomed out and we're just focused on developing these players. So what will we do that will who's the most important player to emphasize? And it would be him in the passing game for sure.
It's fair.
And so building things out around that kind of player. And it's a player who can get open in a variety of ways and can win with the ball in his hands.
So I like it. I think it's a good take by you.
He could maybe get there, but you're still limited in terms of upside. You're probably not getting a touchdown almost every week, so that's kind of where I'm at with Fannin and Besh. It's like they're probably not league winners, but they might.
A little different, I think, for Fannin, just because the context of the team. Like the Browns defense is good enough to sort of keep them in these not pass-heavy game scripts.
If it stays competitive, if they stay motivated. Right. I know that sounds like an insane thing to say about NFL players, but we do see where really good defenses do fall off as the team becomes a joke,
and they just lost Schlesinger, who's a massive reason why that defense was so good this year.
Yeah. Okay, let's transition to some of these receivers. This is the only tight end from round 3. Our round 3 receivers, Kyle Williams. Bit of a disappointment here, but maybe not one that should be any sort of a surprise given the track record we have with the head coach and offensive coordinator here in New England. The top route rate for any given week for Kyle Williams is 27%.
Yikes.
So we're really not seeing anything designed for Kyle Williams. He has only a handful of first read targets. I've watched all his routes and it looks out of sync. So I'm going to say extremely unlikely that he matters for this year. Unfortunately, it would probably take an injury. He's worth knowing because I loved the guy's film, both in college and this preseason. And he's a round 3 pick. I mean, he was drafted ahead of all the round 3 guys that we're about to talk about. To a team that has a quarterback playing at a phenomenally high level. And so if he gets on the field for any reason, it could be pretty cool, So keep Kyle Williams on your radar. Similar note here, Isaac Tesla for the Lions has not done much. Like his playing time has been more than Kyle Williams, but it has not amounted to much. 58% route rate is his highest. That came in week 6. Week 7, it was only at 18% though. So with why do I keep forgetting this guy's name? What's the shorter Titans receiver or Lions receiver's name that's really good with the ball in his hands and he can also win down the field, but he's getting
Khalif Raymond.
Khalif Raymond. Thank you, Dan. With Raymond back in the mix, we get less Isaac Tesla. But if some of these receivers were to miss time, I think he's a player who could be really good. I really liked his film. Pat Bryant. Speaking of guys whose film we really liked, why don't you talk to us about Pat Bryant for a little bit, Dan?
Yeah, Pat Bryant, probably the most fun receiver that I watched on tape this week outside of the big names, Igbuka, and in that Tez Johnson range of just pure player being awesome. So Pat Bryant was a player I loved at Illinois. I'm not gonna make any, I'm not gonna hide this. So it's a little bit of bias, I would say, in that regard, Jacob, because I thought his tape was phenomenal at Illinois. And his tape is good so far in the NFL. Like, look, he's an X receiver who can win every single way. That's what you want. He can be lined up on the boundary. He wins on inbreakers. He wins on body control in the air and locating the football. He won on a vertical route this week. I think he does a really good job. I think you did a great job of showing it on one of the cut-ups you put up of just sinking his hips and getting in and out of his breaks for a player that's a bigger receiver and an X prototype. That's what I want, right? I want the X prototype who can do everything. The problem with Pat Bryant is like he's being utilized more in this offense, but ultimately what's the ceiling for a player in an offense that does use 4 receivers pretty regularly, does use Ingram pretty regularly, does throw a lot of tight end screens, and does like to run the football a lot. It's kind of a numbers game problem for me and a math problem for me. But I want to say I put him in more of the category of like the one you just broke down with Fannin, like great player. And even for Kyle Williams, great player, confirming what we saw on tape. If he gets the opportunity, that's a player I want to have on my teams.
Yep. Let me give you some of the numbers problem here. He's topped out at a 51% route rate. That was in week 5. The rate was 48% this past week. 16% first read target rate is his highest of the year. And I think that's his only rate. Yeah, that's his only rate above 10%. So even though Sean Payton seems to love him and compares him to Michael Thomas and stuff, we haven't seen the usage indicate that he's going to be an important part of the offense. He's gotten on the field more lately. His snap rates are higher than his route rates. And I think that's because he's a big body and a good blocker. People have asked me if he negatively affects Troy Franklin, who's seemingly having a breakout here in year 2. I don't really think so. I think they're just pretty different types of players. But yeah, I did want to just bring Pat Bryant up because he is a round 3 name here, and they have seen more playing time historically as the second half moves on. And I think that we could see that for Pat Bryant. And if there were a Cortland Sutton injury or something, then maybe he steps into a pretty big role.
That's the injury that is would be best for him. It's not Franklin or it's not Mims. It's if Cortland Sutton goes down, he could play that role.
Yeah. Overall, his per route data is not very good, but I think that it's like I talked about. They're not designing anything for him. I also don't think that him and Bo Nix are really on the same page right now. There were a couple routes in this last game where it's just like, what is going on here? And it's either Pat Bryant didn't do what Bo Nix thought he was going to do, or Bo's just like triggering randomly, which does happen sometimes, it seems like.
It does happen sometimes.
So, yeah, on the year, 12% target per route run rate, 0.93 yards per route run for Pat Bryant. Those are not good. There's no way around it. 47% slot rate. I think that's interesting. They've used him in the slot more and more as the year's gone on. I do think in college, he was definitely the X receiver type. And I think if Sutton were to go down, he's the guy who would step into that. But they use him a ton on in-breaking routes in the preseason. A lot of horizontally breaking route usage this preseason. And I think everything about the Michael Thomas comparisons from Peyton makes sense, that like they might envision him as more than just an outside guy who is like the sacrificial X type of receiver. His average depth of target on the year is 9.2 yards. So that's like high, but not really, really high like some of these guys. That's more of like maybe somebody who can be like the number 1 receiver in an offense. I think there is a ceiling case for Pat Bryant where he is the number 1 receiver in Sean Payton's offense. I don't know if we get to it this year though.
Yeah, I like that. I stand by. I agree with that take.
Alrighty. After Pat Bryant, we find Jalen Knoll. We're finishing up with our round 3 receivers here. Jalen Knoll for the Houston Texans. Dan and I freaking loved this guy. We swore that he was better than Jaden Higgins, but the Iowa State Cyclones did not agree. The Houston Texans did not agree with their draft capital, and the playing time so far. But Knoll is the one that we see making plays here. The Texans need a playmaker, and he can make plays in the Tank Dell style down the field, but he also can make plays in the short and intermediate area. I think he is a legitimately pretty good route winner, can win versus man or zone, can win with the ball in his hands. He's a lot stronger than people realize. He did like freaking 23 bench press reps at the combine, and you see routes where he's pushing guys off in that 5-yard range near the line of scrimmage to create like quick short wins. So that's just interesting to me because they're trying to get the ball out of Stroud's hands more quickly, and who's benefiting from that? It's been like Dalton Schultz, but like he's super banged up. He had a bad fall 2 weeks ago and like clearly was hurting after that. And then he came back and played through it last week, but was clearly limited from what I could see. So like to me, we could see more Noel. I just don't know if it will ever be a big enough role. His single game high is only a 46% route rate. And so even with all the injuries, that's the most we've ever seen him play in a game.
Yeah, Noel's an interesting watch because you watch him when you watch the Texans tape from these last 2 weeks, he's clearly the better receiver of these rookie receivers when it comes to just creating separation and affording himself a target for the quarterback. I have a couple notes, like just a super smooth mover, I feel like watching Noel. And then the vertical route he ran that he caught a big pass on last week, just he had a free release for a skinny post, but he really looked smooth when it comes to just like creating that separation, chewing up that ground, running the vertical stem, and then cutting it off and just not wasting a lot of space to present himself a nice target for the quarterback. The issue being, though, like you watch the game and Braxton Berrios is playing a ton. And Braxton Berrios looks okay out there, honestly. Like, looks like an immediate winner for them in the pass game in some of these snaps. So, like, will that role continue? Probably. Like, I don't see any reason. Like, I think Noel can be running the same routes that Berrios is running just as effectively. But clearly, the Texans see a role for Berrios in my mind that maybe they don't think Noel can fill, though he would be the closest to be able to do it. So, if that's the case, and he's also involved in the mix, and Xavier Hutchinson is still a big part of this offense, that's 4 different players in an offense that we cannot really trust for the most part. It's a lot to ask for it to find fantasy consistency there.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting what happens with Noel because he's like getting talked about on a mainstream level now where like you see it all over. People are like, this guy's good. Like, and people want the Texans to be good. They want CJ Stroud to be good because everybody saw him set the league on fire and they know how fun it can be. And so, yeah, you're seeing everybody talk about it now where it's like, why isn't he getting on the field? I don't think it's likely that will affect what happens with the coaching. There's a real chance that it's just Josh Downs,
It is. Yeah.
I and this is just me, but like I thought he had the size and physicality to win on the outside whenever he was asked to do that.
And he has done that, by the way, already at the NFL level.
Yeah. So where he's at is 69% slot rate, but his average depth of target is 10.5 yards. So it's not just the short stuff like Josh Downs.
Right.
Not to pigeonhole Josh Downs. He can do much more. But we've seen Noel used down the field a lot. So you guys, if you've been watching the Texans at all, you've seen some of these big hits. 21% first read or 21% target per route run rate and 1.7 yards per route run is very good. That's much better than Higgins.
And I will reiterate, just from watching that tape, I was very, very enthused by the changes the Texans made to their offense coming out of that bye week, or coming off the game against Seattle, I should say. Just more bunch, more tight formate, more tight splits with the wide receivers. That's the type of stuff that worked with CJ Stroud in his breakout season. That has me a little bit excited.
Would be cool. 1.2 yards per run for Jaden Higgins. So 1.7 for Jalen Noel.
Yeah.
All right. The last 2 round 3 receivers have not mattered at all. It's Savion Williams and Ty Felton for the Vikings. Savion Williams on the Packers. I've been a little discouraged with Savion. I was hoping they would let him work down the field a little bit more, but it seems like they kind of see him as like the gimmicky kind of Cordero Patterson kind of player. That's how they mostly use him. Yeah. So that's where we're at with those guys.
There's just no path for him really the Packers are just so loaded at receiver.
Yeah. He's somebody who's like right on the periphery of like being dropped in dynasty leagues and shallower leagues if you have to. I haven't done it quite yet. But I wish that I know he's not going to get on the field much, but I just wish the usage was different. If he's just a catch and run guy, I don't know what the ceiling ever really is. And Dan and I were like kind of excited he might be able to be somebody who can win down the field more.
I think he is. Yeah. I mean, just from I was really excited about it. There were times where he made some really incredible double moves at TCU and just created that separation, the intermediate vertical. But yeah, you're right. That's not been his role so far. So it's disappointing.
Yeah. Okay, we have arrived. We've worked our way through all of the rounds. We're finally at round 1. Maybe this was a backwards way of doing it. Some of you have been wanting, Travis Hunter questions to be answered, and I get that. Of course, these are the guys who should be the most fantasy relevant, but if you missed it, the data that we have suggests that round 1 players aren't guaranteed, or maybe shouldn't even be expected to see their roles increase in the second half of the season. That doesn't mean that any individual one of them might not. They definitely could. Travis Hunter, I think, is very likely to. Colston Loveland is probably likely to, especially if Cole Kmet continues to miss time. But a lot of these other guys, Tedero McMillan, Emeka Egbuka, Tyler Warren, they're pretty much already in the roles that I think that they're going to play all year. And that might be the case for Matthew Golden too. So those are the round one guys. Dan, who do you think is the least likely of these guys to be a fantasy league winner down the stretch? Loveland or Golden?
Well, yeah, it's a bad choice between those two, but I would go Loveland Loveland's least likely.
I think it's Golden.
I don't think either are very likely. So let's be clear.
That's fair. Golden has a better offense, better quarterback. And that leaves this like upside hypothetically, but Loveland, at least we're like seeing him get on the field now, if he gets another opportunity to be a full-time player this next week and he plays well, then, maybe he continues to grow into that bigger role as the year goes on. But yeah, the data, the underlying data for Loveland doesn't suggest that anything big is coming. And that's kind of where we're at with Golden, even though he's flashed at times and he looks very good on film. I think the film has been more encouraging for Golden so far than Loveland.
Yeah.
But both of them were just dealing with a number of roadblocks to them giving you that type of production. I think the next least likely, and this hurts. I'm so sorry to the Beyond the Box Score people who have sat through this podcast for 100 minutes with us, and now they're just like the guys that there's a bunch of guys that we like and have been excited about that have been hits, but Tedero McMillan not looking likely to be one.
Despite being awesome at football.
Yes. He continues to dominate. We saw in week 8, 94% route rate to go with a 44% first read target rate. So that's the highest number that we've seen for him all year. Ron Stewart, who I brought up at the beginning of the podcast, who like gave the inspiration for this, late season rookie breakout that so many people have been talking about. He sent me on Twitter, like, he was digging into first downs, and the fact that Tedero McMillan has 31 first downs on 37 receptions, which is crazy, right? And no other Panther has more than 8 receiving first downs. Tedero McMillan has 31. So like that is pretty wild to account for 35% of the Panthers' first downs through the air and to be the just clear guy. Like obviously defenses know they have to stop him. If you compare that 35% number to the rest of the league, it's like these guys are all superstars. Jackson Smith and Jigba, 44%. Jamar Chase, 41%. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 37%. Romadunze Puka Nacua, 36%. Then there's T-Mac at 35%. Devontae Smith at 34%. So yeah, he's been great, but I don't feel a lot of optimism about his situation. Bryce Young has struggled to create, big games that are conducive to fantasy success. And I don't think that Dalton did anything to like take that job away from him. So we're probably going back to Bryce.
Yeah, we're going back to Bryce. And more concerning for me, though, I will agree that Dalton was specifically better for McMillan, despite being worse for the Panthers offense, if that makes sense. What's more concerning to me is what I mentioned 3 weeks ago that hasn't borne itself out yet because the Panthers have been able to just stay in script and run the football when they want to in most of these games. This pass protection could be god awful bad the rest of the season. I mean, they have injuries that happened to them this past week. They already were dealing with injuries and just not a lot of talent on that offensive line and pass protection. So if that pass protection continues to break down the way it was, and they're not able to stay ahead of the sticks in the run game and keep the game script good, we're just looking at, in my mind at least, like a really difficult situation for fantasy success overall for the passing game, which will bring down McMillan. In addition to, look, he's maybe a more upside receiver if Dalton plays, and he's not going to play. So it's not a good situation at any point, I don't think.
Yep. Great dynasty buy if people are overreacting at all. But it's basically just a bet on talent and a bad offense. So to me, it's very similar to like Chris Olave. Is there one of those two that you prefer rest of season? The move to Tyler Shuck, man, that's so annoying.
That sucks. Yeah.
Spencer Rattler did nothing to deserve that.
So Rattler did nothing to deserve to get benched. Oh, he threw that bad interception to the D lineman. But really what it seems to be, and I think it's pretty clear, is, and I'm just going to speculate on this, and I'm okay doing this, it's coming down from up top to Kellen Moore.
They took the guy 40th.
We took the guy 40th. We're out of the playoff contention. Let's see a full half season of him that we have tape to evaluate for next season. Meanwhile, they're probably saying, look, Rattler, he's played better. He's made strides, but we don't believe in him long-term anyway. So let's see what Shuck can do. But I agree with you. It's a knock for Olave. It's a knock for that entire passing game. Most likely, I did like some of Shuck. I'm not going to totally bury him right now, Jacob, because there was some Shuck I liked when I evaluated him this past offseason for the Giants. Like, there are some things he does well. He's not just like some like pocket passer who can't do anything. He ran a 4.6 and he made some really good runs at Louisville, but also he made some big throws downfield. He may open up the vertical passing game, or he did at Louisville at least. And we'll see if that helps Olave or it might help Shaheed more. So as far as those two go, I think it's a good comp from a fantasy standpoint. Both are in tough offenses, but maybe McMillan has a better role within that offense. I don't know.
Yeah, sorry, I was pulling up a form here for the people. I wanted to show them the fantasy points per route run leaders at wide receiver while we talked about these last few names, because Luther Burden is at the very top. I feel like we might just have to throw him in as the fifth guy here. I know it doesn't feel like it's happening, but that's exactly what we're talking about here, right? It's like
I feel more comfortable with Tez than Luther.
Tez has looked good. And he's getting on the field right now as a full-time player, which we're not seeing with Luther, and that's fair.
Right.
So what I've got here is you can see all the receiving stats, and it's sorted by fantasy points per route run. And so Luther Burden's at 0.59. Emeka Egbuka is next at 0.46. And then we find Jalen Knoll at 0.38, Tedro McMillan at 0.37, Tez Johnson at 0.36, Torrey Horton at 0.33. So yeah, to your point, Tez Johnson, I think, belongs in that discussion. But if it's just like so clear on paper. What this reminds me of, and it's of course way different than betting on a known commodity, but when we did all of our draft prep research, so many things archetypically using historical research pointed towards Amon-Ra St. Brown being like a massive value in round 2, like the clear pick. And like, why the hell is this guy behind all of these year 2 guys? And that's kind of where how this feels to me, is like everything on paper suggests that like this is the move. And I think sometimes we outsmart ourselves or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, we've done all the research. So like, why don't we just trust it? It's like, cause it doesn't feel quite right or whatever, but it's like, that's the point of doing the research. Yeah, I don't know. But at the same time, sometimes I get too, numbers bound, or, you know, where you're looking at the players as like, data points rather than like the actual situation that they're in, where we don't feel so good about the Bears and everything, and Caleb's ability to get through the reads and everything. Okay, let's finish up the other round 1 guys that we have. We'll talk about each of them as profiles, and then we'll give you.
I just one more thing. I do want to point to that take. Like, I like that take by you, because it's easy now to look at the situation there in Chicago and be like, this is terrible for we can't get on board with this. But things can change within that situation, either from an injury standpoint or just from Caleb taking a step forward within this offense, getting more comfortable with Ben Johnson's offense. And I didn't love the tape, but like, you know, Ben Johnson said there were things I saw on tape that suggested he is taking that step forward mentally. And so if that does happen, we like the player and the prospect. So I don't want to just rule him out. I think he's somebody who should belong on that borderline with a Tez Johnson type.
Yeah, I think so. And he might be less rostered than Tez Johnson, which is kind of crazy when you're talking about a round 2 guy. Okay, I want to finish up with our round 1 profiles here, and then give our picks for most likely to be league winners out of these wide receivers and tight ends. So let's start with Travis Hunter. You'll see Travis Hunter at 0.28 fantasy points per route run. That's in the same range as Kamiri DK and, you know, Isaac Tesla, Matthew Gold, and Trey Harris. So it's not good. He hasn't been that good so far, but I do think a lot of these routes are kind of garbage filler routes. You know, we've seen his role change a lot, and I think that we could see it change even more coming out of the bye week. So I'm pretty intrigued by Hunter. Did you watch his film specifically?
Yeah, Hunter would be
okay. Cool
for me, the number 2 guy as far as breakouts go.
Yeah, we've talked about him. I think that he obviously can win with the ball in his hands, and that's kind of how they've tried to get him going. But I also think that he has the ability to win down the field as a route winner. I worry a little bit that he might not be the zone coverage winner, like they're able to find space in zone coverages, especially on his downfield routes that they need from their true wide receiver one. But BTJ has struggled in that way too, in addition to the, struggles at the catch point. So if he can just improve on what BTJ has been, then I think we'll see more and more looks shift his way. And BTJ has had massive usage. If you look at like expected fantasy points and all of that, first read target rates, it has been very good for BTJ. It suggests that he should be producing like a wide receiver one, and that's because this offense has been really good. So that's where we're at with Travis, is like the round one data that we have from Dwayne and Ryan suggests that, maybe we shouldn't expect any huge increase. And like when I talked with Dwayne and looked at ranges of outcomes, it was like, be cautious because we don't know how this role will unfold. They might decide they need him more on defense, but there's definitely a very real upside case where he's like a wide receiver 2 who could give you wide receiver 1 types of spike weeks. And that absolutely could be a league winning pick. Like we saw with Brian Thomas Jr. He wasn't always giving you wide receiver 1 numbers in the second half of last year, but he happened to line up the 3-week stretch during the fantasy playoffs where it was like 20 plus points every single time, And I do think that type of upside is available to Travis here. Of course, it all comes down to Trevor Lawrence.
And I think the 2 reasons why I wouldn't use his data that we have on him in the small sample size to start the season are, 1, it's clear and obvious, and it's been said by the coaching staff that they wanted to make sure he had a better feel and grasp for the playbook before they expanded his route tree. And you could just see it when you watch his most recent game. He's running a completely different route tree than he ran earlier in the season. So that's a really good sign as far as what it could mean moving forward. And then just 2, like, I'm with you. He can run the full route tree. He can win downfield. He wins with a release off the line of scrimmage. He's not just this yards after the catch guy. That's clear. He's really, really good when it comes to playing the ball in the air. He doesn't have the biggest catch radius, but he does a really good job of locating the football with insane level body control and hands. So there's also the second component, which is, do the Jags look at this offense over the bye week and be like, I'm just going to be honest with ourselves right now. We have a better chance to win if Hunter is our primary, not Brian Thomas Jr., given what Brian Thomas Jr. can give us right now. And if that's the case, like, that's a huge role for fantasy moving forward.
I think that's probably where we're at. And that probably might only be 55% or whatever. But
yeah,
I think both him and Bashal Tune are really, really interesting players coming out of this Jaguars bye.
Right.
So anywhere I can hold them on a bench spot, I am. And if you want to go buy them, you might get a big hit on that. So the other round one player to talk about is Emeka Egbuka.
Oh, yeah.
I feel really good about the Bucs' schedule down the stretch. We've talked about Tez Johnson a lot today. Egbuka is, the obvious one here, where like even with playing through an injury, he's still averaging a really strong 0.46 fantasy points per route run, 2.13 yards per route run. Everything looks really, really good for Emeka Egbuka. So what are your expectations, Dan, rest of the season? Would you put him in the top 12 range, in that like Rome Odunze, that type of range? Like that's clearly where he's at for Dynasty, but rest of season this year, is that where he's at for you?
Yeah, without a doubt. He's number 1 on this show today. We're breaking down potential league winning rookies rest of year. It's Egbuka number 1. Watching the tape over the last 2 weeks, I tried to parse them together, but also separate them because one was with Mike Evans on the field for a short period. And then without Evans, what I really liked about Egbuka was he's playing more of the role that I'm excited for. He had an ISO X. He was the isolated X receiver in the red zone, and they threw him a back shoulder ball that it wasn't really great timing with him and Baker. It didn't miss, but I don't care. I'm happy to see him getting back shoulder ISO routes in the red zone. That's what's important to me. Once again, he burned the coverage this past week against the Saints with a double move on a vertical route. But he had to slow down for the football despite creating like 3 to 4 yards of separation. It was a little bit underthrown from Baker, and it was broken up, but that's not what I care about. I care about the separation he created on the vertical plane. He's a very deceptively fast receiver because he runs his route so well, and people don't look at him as a vertical route runner, but he is. He wins at all 3 levels of the field consistently. And then I like how they were using him a lot this past game against the Saints as the pre-snap motion man.
Yeah, real quick on that point, and then I want to get to this next one too. I don't know if people realize how high his average depth of target is. Like, he is winning all over the field, especially down the field. Before this past week, his average depth of target was 11 yards or higher in every single game.
Right.
Which is really surprising for who people thought he was coming into the process.
And they were wrong about what they thought he was, let's be honest.
His average depth of target was down this past week to 9.2 yards, to Dan's point about more pre-snap motion and stuff. 53% first read target rate in week 8. The highest it's been in any game before that was 35%. So 53% is massive. That's where we're getting into like Jackson Smith and Jigba type of usage here.
Yes.
And I think as he's healthier, that might be kind of where they settle in. Is like, we don't know what we're going to get from Evans and Godwin down the stretch. Let's just build this out as if he's the wide receiver 1.
There's literally almost no hesitation for him. Like I said, they're using him pre-snap motion to get him these free releases. They have him lined up over from the slot, running outbreakers, inbreakers, over out, just deep, those intermediate deep corner routes that he seems to do a great job of creating separation, getting open. My only hesitation, if I had any hesitation, because you did a great job of breaking down the upside there from a route target share standpoint, is something weird and wrong going on with this Bucs offense? Because I know like last week was weird and difficult to evaluate fully because it was an odd game and they jumped out by so much. But the last 2 weeks is putting them together for me. I don't know if Baker's hurt, but he just doesn't look to be playing at the same MVP level he was earlier this year. And I think the offensive line is not protecting as well as I expected it to be. And they've had some injuries there too. I don't think so. I'm going to kind of put that in just like a note, put a pin in it, but I'm still pretty confident that they'll get this back on track, the Bucs offense. And if they are, and if they do, then Egbuka, I think you're right, has a chance to push into like that top 12, top 10 range overall.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued. To your point about like creating a lot of separation, Fantasy Points data has this charted as his second best game of the year in terms of separation score. And over the past 3 weeks, they've charted his win rate as just being like higher and higher and higher. It wasn't quite as high in week 8, but his week 6 and 7 win rate, route win rate numbers were really good. So I think he's continuing to just be a real problem for opposing coverages, and he's continuing to come into his own more and more and not just be, somebody who's relying on big plays, somebody who can get these massive first read target rates. If I had to guess, I think Tampa Bay will find it. I feel pretty confident, but Baker has been erratic, dude. It's been all over the place.
Just of late, yeah. I think, look, it makes sense, right? You're a quarterback and you're down Evans, you're down a lot of the receivers that you're down even McMillan. You're down receivers you built this rapport with, and now you're having to reestablish it from scratch. The one more negative I did want to throw out, I do think losing Evans is actually not it's a good thing for him from a PPR standpoint, from a first read standpoint, it's just getting more targets, but it just leaves what I thought was watching this game, like there's so much less space to work with post catch for Egbuka now versus there was earlier in the season. And I don't think that changes much with like Taz Johnson, Sterling Shepard, and those types of receivers on the field instead of Evans and Godwin.
All right, let's talk through, we'll end with Egbuka here and then we'll get to our like 5 picks, but let's talk through real quick where you have him at, because I think he might actually be somebody that's a good buy. Early in the year is like untouchable, but I wonder if people's faith has wavered a little bit because it hasn't been as good lately. He's still going to be expensive, but let's go Egbuka or Justin Jefferson.
Oh man, that's so funny. Like trying to figure out what I want to feel about the Vikings moving forward. Wentz out for the year. JJ McCarthy being rushed back to some extent. Both their tackles are hurt right now. I don't know if they're playing this week, O'Neal and Darisaw, but if they're out for any extended period of time, I have no faith in that passing game. You are not going to make it in the NFL with 2 backup tackles, especially if McCarthy and I want to go with Buka.
Me too. Yeah, no, that's
much to say because Jefferson's Jefferson, but
the apprehension that Dad just expressed is exactly where I'm at with Justin Jefferson. Yeah. What about George Pickens or Egbuka?
It's Egbuka for me, despite my love for Pickens, because I do feel like you brought up the numbers, man. The 58% first target, that's crazy stuff. And I like that they're using him in the red zone now.
Drake London or Egbuka?
I'm going to go London still. I think the upside I saw with London definitely would put him ahead for me. And London and Pick, it seems at least like Penix will be back for this week.
I am going to take Egbuka over London. And you know me, I almost never choose the other side when it comes to a Drake London discussion. Yeah. It could be good for London down the stretch. Like week 15 is against Tampa Bay. Week 16 is the Cardinals. Week 17 could be a shootout against the Rams. But man, Penix has me nervous. And just their offense there have been too many times where I've seen the offense get completely figured out. And I don't like that they haven't been able to adapt to that.
It's true.
I don't know. when it's been at its best, it's been funneled through London, so maybe we do see that.
Good point, though. You're right about that. There's been some very inconsistent offensive games there. One was with Cousins, to be fair, but yeah.
To me, the roles might be kind of similar. I think London's going to have more target and air yard numbers than Egbuka, but they might be kind of similar, and I just trust the offense more.
Yeah, I don't hate the take. I really don't.
The other guys are like Devontae Adams and Roma Dunze, and beyond that, it's like, well, now we're at top 5,
Yeah. As far as Adams, are you asking Adams and Dunze?
Yeah.
I would say Egbuka over Dunze for sure for me. Adams, I really love Adams, but with Puka coming back, I might take Puka over all these players, honestly.
Yeah. So that's. I think he is still a good buy, and he's clearly going to be one of our 5 league winners for you guys that we teased 2 hours ago. Dan, you're getting Josh Allen comps with the new nose. How do you feel about that? That's a good one.
It's not
right?
a new nose. It's not, despite the fact that my nose is
same nose.
Same nose. I wish I could get a new nose. I mean, I literally can't breathe out of one side of my one nostril. There's nothing, no air going out, which this is what helps me do that. And the other one has like 20%, according to the doctor. But I do like a Josh Allen comp. It's too generous, though. As far as league winners go, let's transition there.
Egbuka, number 1.
Easy one.
Gadsden, number 1.
You mean 2? Yeah.
I don't know. I mean number 1. What do you think?
Oh, you're putting him in the mix. No.
Okay. Just such massive upside. I think like Egbuka, I guess, could give you some like 30-point games and stuff down the stretch if they get into huge shootouts, but it's like Gadsden could give you 30-point games. He's already done it.
Yeah.
Like, what if he's giving you 30-point games down the stretch and anytime he gives you 20 or 30, you're outscoring the other team's tight end by probably like 15 points at least.
Yeah. That's the case now for tight ends, which I like. Wow, Gadsden or Egbuka? I'm just going to go Egbuka still. I think we're going to get some frustrating games out of Gadsden just from a volume standpoint. And that
for sure,
any of those will come with Egbuka.
For sure. All right. Tight end whose usage we feel better about is Tyler Warren, of course. He's got 2 more games against the Steelers and the Falcons, and he's got a Week 11 bye, and then an interesting schedule. So he's got the Chiefs in Week 12 and the Texans in Week 13. Those aren't necessarily good matchups. The Chiefs could be a good back-and-forth shootout. I am so excited for that game.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Week 14 against the Jags, and then we get to the fantasy playoffs. Seahawks, kind of a tough matchup there. Week 16 against the 49ers. That could be a really fun back-and-forth game. And then Week 17 against the Jags. How does that feel to you, Dan? Do you think he's in the same range as Gadsden or more likely to be a league winner than Gadsden?
I think most people would say he's more likely to be a league winner than Gadsden. As far as we go, let's break that down and let's try to figure out where we stand there. I watched tape of the Colts offense this past week against the Titans, and I do think he's in a role that to me is very like fail safe. Like it's very, very difficult for me to imagine them taking him away because they line him up as a fullback, which is awesome. And they line him up. It's like Gadsden. They line him up all over the field, except they also have this role for him where he's lined up as a fullback and gets these like free releases. And he's wide open a lot of the times. When he runs that corner route in the red zone, I've seen no teams figure out how to stop him. And now we're like 6-7 weeks into the season. Like, defensive coordinators are looking at the Colts tape and being like, Warren is a primary. We have to find a way to take him away. And they're not able to do that. Partially, and I think a lot has to do with the fact that the run action is so sick. Like, that run game is the best in the NFL. It's the best offensive line in the NFL. Tanner Bortolini, who went to Wisconsin, has somehow emerged and developed into one of the best centers in the NFL. I never saw that coming. They did. He had great athletic traits. And shout out Tony Sparano Jr., their offensive line coach, because he's doing a hell of a job there developing players. So if that run action remains the same, it's going to lead to these bootleg plays and just this open Warren off the run action. So I still think he's going to make big plays down the field, touchdowns in the red zone, get those free looks in the short and intermediate game. Am I going to put him ahead of my boy Gadsden? That's the question. Where do you stand there? I'll toss it to you first.
So I think we have the potential for a sort of similar setup. The offensive line isn't as good in Indy or in LA for sure. But if Hampton comes back and plays well, we've seen that they've been able to run the ball pretty successfully lately with Kamani Vidal, and maybe that's matchups and stuff, and teams not respecting the run. But I guess that's what I'm saying is like, even with teams not respecting the run, Gadsden's been able to keep producing, and like maybe we see them have to shift up more to try to stop the run. That's what teams did against the Chargers early in the year.
Right.
So like that could help things a little bit to like even it out when comparing him to Warren. I wanted to look at the two comparatively in terms of upside, and like how high their rates have pushed, because I think they're actually sort of similar in that they're clearly going to be emphasized in the play action game, but they're not necessarily just like the straight drop back games, like first three target all that often. It's normally going to be Pittman and or Downs that are like the route winners, and then Warren's kind of like the secondary read. So Warren's first three targets have pushed up to 35%. That was week 6, 30% in week 1. And beyond that, you're looking at 24, 21, 21%. So he has the potential to push into a big range, but he's not doing it all that often. Even last week, it was like 18%. Gadsden has first three target rates of 32%, 23%, and 19% in the past 3 weeks. So that surprises me. That's like basically with full health, outside of one game. But that was his 32% rate, to be fair, in that game with QJ out. But we have seen like similar types of ceiling numbers for him to Warren. And then, of course, that's with deeper average depths of target than Warren. And I think the QBP play, for all that we've said about Daniel Jones, to his credit, like is clearly better for Gadsden. Also, like if you look at the fantasy points data charting, like route win rates and stuff, Gadsden is the rare tight end that like is popping off in these numbers. You know what I mean? Like Warren is good, but like I remember in the past I've looked and I'm like, I don't really get it. Like how Tucker Kraft is so good. Like his route win rate's not good. You know, he's not like separating. It's like most tight ends aren't. You know, like what Kraft does is like has been, and he's getting better at it. But like what he has done in the past that's so special, Kraft, is like get the ball in his hands and smash.
Yeah.
Warren is like kind of a good route winner, but Gadsden is like blowing him out of the water in terms of the top range of his outcomes here, in terms of creating separation. And I do think like, if he hits his upside, like it's probably bigger than Warren's.
He's a receiver playing the tight end position in some ways, right? Like
I know it's
in different ways.
It's just insane to say because Warren's numbers are all like right on track with Brock Bowers' numbers from last year, who is the tight end one in fantasy. Through this point of the season, they're basically identical to Bowers, is where Tyler Warren's at. But I do think there's this type of upside exists for Gadsden too.
Yeah.
Especially like there's still this contingent upside. Like if something happens to Ladd McConkey or something, God forbid, then, Gadsden is in an even larger role. And I think he's good enough that he could still succeed, even if
he would succeed. Yeah.
Even if defenses are keying on him more. I think they're right in the same range. They're both clearly league winners.
It's kind of like the Warren situation. There's no real way to key on a player like Gadsden from the way they're lining him up and the way they're aligning him and using him.
He's just the best, man. If you look at his late season schedule, he's got the Eagles in week 14, then he hit the fantasy playoffs. He's got the Chiefs in week 15, could be a fun shootout there. Then the Cowboys in week 16, that could be a fun shootout, but then tough matchup against the Texans in week 17. So that's worth knowing for sure, but he absolutely might get you there with some big games before that, and that's important. All right, those are our clear top 3. And we're going to go Travis Hunter as number 4 league winner for you. And as far as the 5 spot, these are the names that I had in order, in terms of who I would put as most likely. And so that's Tez Johnson, Luther Burden, Jalen Knoll, Pat Bryant. But I think we've got some guys who are relying on injury. So that's Pat Bryant, Luther Burden, Torrey Horton, and Trey Harris. And I like all of them. We've talked about them, and go back. We'll have timestamps and like listen to the specific player profiles if you missed it, but they're probably going to need an injury. And I do think that's where Luther Burden is. And I think that's probably where Pat Bryant is too. Jalen Knoll, I think he could get there even without an injury because he does offer something unique to the team. Nobody else on the team really offers. We just haven't seen it yet from a playing time standpoint, but that's exactly what we're doing with this research today, is outlining that it happens not most of the time, but often it does happen where the player's role increases as the year goes on.
Right.
Beyond the names we've given there's plenty of other candidates here, I think. And you can pick one of these if you want. I would love that. Like Kamiri DK is next for me. Gunnar Helm. Like I think either of those guys could be. It's just like the Titans. So how likely is it? But somebody like DK can create with the ball in his hands. He can create downfield looks. Cam Ward has the ability to hit him down the field for sure. So like you could sneakily get some explosive plays, and he's free. Terrence Ferguson, massive upside, I think, for Terrence Ferguson down the stretch, but he's got to get the role. We have no idea if he will. But all these guys that I'm mentioning now are free. Jack Besh for the Raiders. We've talked about him. Probably not a huge upside play, but definitely somebody who could give you some production for free. And the last one is Mason Taylor, kind of like Jack Besh, but he is more rostered. but a guy who could just be a volume sponge. And if the offense goes to more passing, if they go away from Fields or whatever, then those rates could extrapolate to bigger numbers. Who stands out? Who's our fifth pick here in your mind? It's Tez.
Well, it's tough because it's either Tez for sure for me because the role is already there, and we've seen that offense dominate at times with Baker Mayfield, the pass game specifically, and he looks good. Or it's saying, like if there's an injury, because I don't think Tez has the most upside if someone were to be in the role that I expect Tez to be in. But how am I going to be able to predict an injury to any of these other situations? And I'm just not going to be able to predict that, to be quite frank. So I'm going to go with Tez Johnson. He's in the role right now that I want him to be in. You talked about the 93% route participation. He looks good out there on tape, and he has a quarterback who's produced big time numbers in the passing game in the past.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'll side with you on Tez Johnson. That's fun because we've went with a lot of the obvious picks, So let's go with the round 7 pick. I'm just cracking up at the comments here. And I felt it like as we were talking through that, I'm like, we're getting really deep in the weeds of comparing two guys who are already rostered by a ton of people are obvious picks as league winners of these two tight ends, but they're talking about imagining me ordering food and just like analyzing every single piece of it. Like, this sounds good, but this sounds good.
And this sounds better.
Oh, man.
So that's our list. Those are the 5 rookies we think, wide receivers and tight ends, that could be league winners. Either you have them already on your roster, and everyone we mentioned for the most part, except those Flyers, will be rostered. But some of these players you can trade for right now. I still think Igbuka is a buy now, a buy high type player, our number 1 player. Travis Hunter, there's still an opportunity to get him before a potential breakout, especially if what we're saying is true, which is 1, they realize that he is the better option for them to be the primary in the passing game. BTJ continues to stay injured and disappointing. And then 2, he just knows the playbook better, and he's just more comfortable running the routes. So he's one I'm excited about as well. We put him in at 4, I believe. Those tight ends are locked in as well. So hopefully you enjoyed this show. Talked a lot of rookies. We got into some tape. We got into some stats. A lot of fun stuff. Thank you for tuning in. Please, please, please hit the like button. Please share the show with your friends. Please leave a rating and review. Leave us some questions on the Apple reviews. All the reviews lately have been super kind, super complimentary, but no questions for us to get to on the show. It's just like, you guys are great. Thank you. And like, that's great. But we want to help you out. So if you have any trade questions, or if you just want to know about players or whatever, if you like the deep dive kind of stuff that we did today, we'd be happy to help you out if there's somebody you're curious about. Yep. Thanks again to everybody tuning in. Thanks for everybody who's been active in the comments, got this show going. And Christian says, love hearing so many of my Dynasty players shout out. Yeah, this is good for Dynasty as well. So hopefully you enjoyed that too. Really appreciate the community we've built. Thank you for tuning in. We apologize for not being there yesterday. Jacob was massively sick, and as you can tell, I could not breathe. Got a lot of comments on this intake breathing thing. I probably will retire it after this show, but
we're all proud of you for sticking the whole show and not taking it off.
Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.